Hey, how you doing? Hope you all are doing great. As you seen in the thumbnail, in this video, we are gonna see, imagine Naruto founder of Justice League and had harem with Catwoman and Poison Ivy. This is part 2 and 130 likes on this and I will upload part 2 and comment down your thoughts, before getting into video. I request you to check the author of this fanfic, and show some love and support. Name of the story is Justice League, Fire Shadow by Freedom Guard, do check it out. All details in description. Let's get into the video. Also check out Patreon for uncensored spicy content, link in description. Naruto whistled a bit as he was now looking at the outskirts of the city. He had gotten out of the woods after a while, and was now there in front of the first city in his plan to see this world on a more personal level. So this is Metropolis, huh? Not as big as LA, but certainly a good sight. The blonde Hokage was very interested to see the world and the cities, namely those with recognized heroes, since he wanted to see what they were like in the flesh. He felt that one can only learn so much from magazines, rumor mills, and newspapers. And observing the people in question was a more complete way of understanding them. He still had his gear and weapons hidden in some scrolls should he need them, and at least he had his laptop to boot. And he was very keen on the idea on making sure to meet the heroes who resided here. He was already aware of Superman, but he was also aware that there were others in the city as well. He was aware of the one known as Steel, and the other being Superman's cousin, the one named Supergirl, who he had to admit was rather good looking and would have really got the attention of guys who were around his physical age and not his actual age, not to mention the attention of his godfather. He placed that aside however and decided to go into the city, but not before making a few changes to himself. He took to the direction of a nearby car stop and grabbed something to eat and then do the changes, then head into the city and go to his work. Besides, he might pick up some brand new ideas to add to his creations. All the while, he decided to work on that idea of him making an autobiography of himself and make a story out of it. He had no idea on how this might play out, but as he had learned very early in life, there was a first time for everything and this might pan out well in the end. In Metropolis. Not too bad, Naruto stated to himself, as he walked through the city, as he was now disguised with his hair now deep brown and he placed on some contact lenses to change his eye color and also had a henge on to hide his whisker marks. He was now moving on with the rest of the city crowd and wanting to see just what this place was. He did have some prior reading on the city and knew that this was going to be an interesting area, considering that a good number of people reside here. Not to mention the fact that this was also the home turf of Superman, his cousin, Steel, and a few others. He was not sure what he was going to do when he would meet them in person. But he was going to have to prepare himself for anything that might happen while he was there. As he moved through the streets, he also made sure to keep his eyes and ears open as well as his battle-hardened senses for anything that might happen around him. The city was well known for having quite a number of more than interesting criminals and he had yet to meet them. Most of the time, he had to deal with the garden variety crooks and criminals as the QB snidely called them, and thought that they were small fry compared to the criminal lords, ninjas, and that he and the blonde Jinchuriki had dealt with in their time together. And to some point, Naruto had to agree. He was very curious what sort of high-powered criminals were there in this world that he would have to watch out for. He soon arrived at one of the most recognized places in the city, and that was none other than the Daily Planet. He had to admit that it was impressive by the standards of buildings back in Konoha. But he was not going to try and compare it. For now, however, he decided to go and grab a newspaper and see just what was on the news on this side of the world. He spotted a newspaper boy and asked for one and paid the guy with some of his money, and cracked open the news to see what would be there on the pages. One topic had to do with the actions of several countries on a variety of matters. Another dealt with some new action by some celebrity or another, the actions of another company, though in the case of Metropolis there was only LexCorp in the spotlight. There was mention of Superman doing some more good deeds, though there was some dissent towards the hero that was there for Naruto to read. The former Hokage could not help but notice that in his picture. The man had stress lines on his face, and he could relate as despite his youthful appearance, he felt the arrival of the said lines on his face when he was doing his job as Hokage. No The guy was working his butt off to try and redeem his name, and Naruto had no problem with that as he expected it from the man. He looked at the rest of the newspaper, and when he was getting tired of reading it, he decided to store away the newspaper in his backpack and moved on to see what else was going to happen. He stopped, however, when he spotted a number of people coming out of the tall building there. One of them appeared to be a dark-haired and blue-eyed woman who wore a white skirt and a business-style top in light blue-violet color, and no doubt wore a second type of shirt underneath. The other was a guy with wide shoulders, tall to boot, and while the suit made him look normal, Naruto was willing to bet that underneath said suit the guy was seriously well built. The glasses might also give him a look that showed he was harmless, but the last person he knew who wore glasses was not in any way, shape or form, harmless. The woman was very attractive in his mind, and no doubt if he was still alive, his perverted godfather Jiraiya would already be making his move on her, and he would admit the same thing. But judging from the way the woman was with the man and how the man was close to the woman, that told him that he would not approve. Not to mention that the way the woman moved showed that she was skilled in defending herself, not to the level of facing highly trained assassins yet, but close enough to handle the odd thug and overconfident fellow with lecherous intentions. The guy on the other hand sent warning bells in his head as he felt his danger sense. Warn him even more that this guy was not to be trifled with, though he was not evil looking in the slightest. But for some oddball reason, he looked somewhat familiar to him. Why is it I get the feeling I know that guy? Naruto decided to try and get an image of the man and headed to a nearby camera store and decided to get a disposable camera, namely the kind that had no flash and would be easy to use. He was not sure what to make of these cameras as they were a load more advanced than the ones he had seen back home, but after a while he decided not to bother with the details on operation and focused on use. He then began to follow the group to see what was it about the guy that was making his ninja senses go on the alert and giving him the message that he was no ordinary person. He moved at the other side, making sure to keep himself controlled and invisible, and it seemed to work a good deal, that is until the group got into a taxi and were now on their way somewhere in the city. He could have gone after them on foot, but doing that was not an option. Naruto decided that now was the time to go up to the air. He moved a bit further and entered an alleyway, making sure that he was alone and no one was around to see him. Seeing that he was indeed alone, he quickly changed into his normal gear for ninja work and also got a bottle of water out to wash out the hair dye, to return his hair to its natural blonde state. With that out of the way, he quickly moved on the walls with chakra on his feet and moved to the roof. As he got there, he decided to switch to Sage mode and focused on the dark-haired woman instead of the man. He had no idea if the man had the ability to sense him being tracked via chakras, since no one in this world seemed to use let alone know of chakra the way he did. But no sense taking risky gambits this early. But the very second he was able to sense chakra, he was quite surprised to sense that man's chakra, it was not human in a very real sense. And he knew that as compared to the chakra of the people around him, along with the man in that car, the man's was denser to a level and also had a strange feel to it, almost like it was no part of the natural flow of chakra in a person, and he sensed that it was near cage level chakra or that of a Jinchuriki tapping into the initial stage of the tailed form, something he knew very well. He got up and decided to follow the signature, but not before deploying 2 cage bushin to remain behind and gather more chakra for him to use. The nature energy here was a bit dull due to the modernization of the place, but not that bad to others. It took a while for him to follow the car as he used his kunai with the wire to move from building to building while using his chakra, which was handled to his feet to hold on to the walls, and using his senses in Sage mode to follow the car until it reached its destination and at least it was near some docks. That allowed him to try and get a better vantage point, and where he quickly returned to using henge, only this time he took the appearance of one of the many dock workers while making sure to change his hair color a bit with some chakra application. He made sure to keep himself cool and calm as he tracked the trio, and they were soon before a man who Naruto guessed was the one they came to see. He watched them carefully, silently, hoping that he was going to find out just who the big guy was, and as soon as the man began to take notes and speak his turn, he waited for what he had no idea, and as soon as the interview was over, the blonde noted him place his arms on his chest in a cross pattern as he seemed to smile at something, as the two who were with him were rather animated in their discussion. He decided to take a shot at it and took a picture of the man. Once he did so, he decided to try another experiment and headed towards the trio. He knew that he had to time it right and make it look like an accident as he took out some of his loose change from his pocket. He then dropped the coins down and made sure that some of the change rolled to the direction of the people in question. He then spoke out as the coins stopped before the trio. Damn it, they rolled out of my pockets again. That worked as the man he had been looking at and observing moved to his knees to help get the coins and spoke to him as soon as he got up and offered the coins to him. Here you go, I think it's better that you have a wallet on hand next time. Naruto smiled a bit at that and replied as normally as he could manage. He gave a sheepish grin and scratched the back of his head as he pocketed his coins and spoke. Sorry about that, I was a bit of a butterfingers with coins growing up. My name's Curtis Riley, new here in the docks, you are. Hello then Curtis, the name is Clark Kent from Smallville. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that though he did that very slowly. Smallville. There's a place with that kind of name. Better focus on the mission of finding out more of this guy. Closing parenthesis. Nice to meet ya as well Clark, anyway, you happen to be a reporter I take it. Yeah, from the Daily Planet, and so are my friends here, meet Lois Lane. Naruto looked at Lois Lane and mentally whistled at the way she looked, which was definitely a looker with the dark hair, well-featured face, and eyes. Not to mention the figure to boot. He extended his hand and she shook his hand as well. In that moment, he was able to tell that despite her being a beauty, this lady had some strong muscle tone and with his battle-hardened senses could tell that she had combat training, possibly self-defense. He decided to keep his normal persona under wraps and just stick to the persona he developed when in Henge. Good to meet you Miss Lane. Same to you Curtis, you full or part-time? Part-time, supposed to be signing off today anyway. Lois nodded and that was when Clark introduced the orange-haired and freckle-faced guy next to them. And this is Jimmy Olsen, one of our photographers in the Daily Planet. Naruto looked at the guy and saw that he was fresh-faced, eager, dedicated, and also very energetic, reminded him slightly of himself when he was still younger. It made him grin in his usual fashion and spoke to Jimmy. Nice to meet ya Jimmy. Likewise, I am also one of the best photographers in the planet, you can ask both Clark and Lois. I worked with them a long time. I see, anyway, I have to get a move on, don't want my bosses to be thinking I was slacking off. As soon as he left them, Naruto kept himself focused on getting away from them without raising any alarm bells and it was not long before he was in the clear. He sighed a bit and removed the henge. But that was when he heard a massive explosion happening in the same docks. And felt the explosion as well. He looked to see what was going on and it seemed that the dock workers had an accident and he looked around carefully to see the PO. PLE there moving around in different directions, some ran away, others moved in to see what was going on, and other moved in to help. That was when he noted that Clark had disappeared from Lois and Jimmy. He raised an eyebrow at that and then spotted none other than Superman. He kept himself hidden as best he could and calm as he watched the Man of Steel as he was called and saving the people who were in the area of the detonation. Once that was done and the fire department came, he saw Superman talking to the dock workers on what happened and he was in a pose that he recognized easily with the stoic but calm and relaxed look. Naruto took the picture of that and soon left. Hours later. Man. Feels good to be on a bed. Naruto said as he was now resting in a hotel that he managed to pay for with his funds from being a writer, and he was soon going to have room service brought up for dinner an hour or so later. It annoyed him that they did not have ramen but decided to try other food as well to see how it would fare. For now however, some rest was in order as well as a meal. He dozed off for at least an hour or so as he had gone off to have the pictures developed and soon paid for them and got to the hotel. He had only dozed off for an hour or so before he heard the doorbell and the call. Room service. Naruto woke up quickly and headed to the door and opened it to let the man walk in with a tray. It still amazed him that a guy could actually come here and order food and drink in the comfort of their own room. Sure he had food in his own place and could ask a yame. And the ones she and her father hired at times for food deliveries come to the Hokage residence, but this was different either way since he did not have to pay a large amount for it. He however placed that aside and began to eat the food once it was on his table. The food comprised of salmon sashimi, roasted beef, hot potatoes, and rice balls along with a pitcher of cold lemon tea. The food was custom ordered by him, and since he was going to be in here in Metropolis, he was going to make the most of it. He was happy that he had gotten a lot of money to stay in the hotel for a week and a half. Once he was done eating, he decided to get to work and see what was it that made him think that this Clark Kent was hiding something about himself. He got the pictures he had and also began with the picture of Clark. He took out a scroll he had hidden and called out a kunai. He then channeled a bit of his wind chakra to increase the cutting power. He had to be careful though, since overdoing it might cut through the table and even the floor, and the last thing he wanted was to explain to the people who owned the place why one of their tables was cut in half or worse. Once he was done with what he had in mind, he made his next move, and there he made a very interesting discovery. Well, now, this is a surprise. Closing parenthesis. Naruto looked at the image before him and smirked slightly. He had taken he newly acquired picture of Superman that he had from the docks only hours before and had placed the cutouts of the man he had pictured on the image of Superman, namely the suit, shoes, and glasses minus the eyes. And when he looked at the image, he could not help but see the similarities, and what he sensed from his use of senjutsu only served to convince him further. He decided for now to place the discovery he made aside, as he then decided to destroy the images. Clark Kent was Superman and apparently was working in that place called the Daily Planet as a cover. And he could not help but shake his head at how no one but him had figured out the true identity of the hero of Metropolis. Then again, if one were to look at Clark, despite the size and build, he looked like a guy who got $10 on for his lunch money on a regular basis. He should know, since he used to get hit a lot by bullies as a kid before he developed a reputation as prankster without equal and also developed his taijutsu skills. As he took the images, he decided to rely on his wind chakra to slice the pictures into nothing but bite-sized chunks and stuff them into the trash bin. He could have gone for fire chakra, but that would have triggered the fire alarms, and he was not in the mood for that to happen. He then took a shower, and when he was done with the said shower, he got back into the room and opened the curtains to see the city and admitted that it looked nice at night. Once that was done, he decided to open up his laptop and begin to write his stories, connecting his portable internet USB drive and getting to work, as it was time to earn another internet paycheck. In the meantime, he was going to do something in Metropolis to get feel of the place and also see if he could see Superman in action, as well as learn more of him to see just what sort of guy he was underneath the cape. The next day, Naruto was up and about early in the morning and decided to call the desk that he planned to go outside early and have his room locked down until he got back. He had spent at least 6 hours on his latest work as Sage Thompson and also began to send the drafts for his own comic. He made it up as a way to chronicle his own life and decided to use his first name as the title of the comic and the character, and using the name Masashi Kishimoto as his pen name for this side of the deck. It was a name that seemed right to him, and he went to work in making the history of he placed that he had grown up on Japan and had learned about anime and manga and wanted to make his own series that could be accepted in Western audience groups. That was why he also decided that when he had the chance, he was going to learn how to draw manga, and since he had good enough memories of his fellow ninja and the people in the elemental nations, allies and enemies, he could draw them. It was just a try and he was not sure how effective it was, but no sense not trying something new every now and then. He also recalled that it was the way that Jiraiya made the book that shaped his life and that of Nagato, who he found out later in life was one of his fellow clansmen in the Uzumaki side of things. And he hoped had found peace in the afterlife alongside his family and friends. If he could make a story about the life he lived that could inspire others as that book Jiraiya made inspired others, then why not do it? Besides, if he had to do book signing, there was always Henge. Once he was done with that and saved the files, he left the hotel and carried a special note in his pockets. Once he felt that he was in the clear, he moved to an alleyway and out of sight of anyone else. He then decided to get decked out in his regular clothes and see the city the only way he liked. He quickly climbed up the nearby wall and tossed out his kunai to the next building and began to move around the city, sampling the sights and already seeing the first rays of sunlight coming up to cover the city. And as he moved from place to place, he looked down to see how the people were, and they were acting like the people he had seen back there in LA. Some moved about to do their daily chores, others went to work. Some wondered about, and enjoying the day. And naturally when he moved over them in his outfit and mask, they were soon reacting, though in a way that he did not expect as they spoke out. Look, up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's. I have no idea what or who that is. There were people looking up at him as he moved over the city using his kunai with the wire and on occasion his own chakra chains. And he wagered a guess this was how Superman would be known, seeing as this was the man's home city. And he found the lines rather amusing to boot. As he moved over the ropes and swinging away like a maniac, he stopped over at the Daily Planet and figured he could move around to say hi as it were. In Perry's office. Perry was currently discussing some matters pertaining to the incident yesterday with his reporters, and naturally two of his best, Lois Lane and Clark Kent, were there along with the others. He was eager to see if they could find some news about Superman and see if they could help change the image he had on him, and they had good reason to do so. Perry held Superman in high regard and wanted to try and help him recover the trust of the people. And while he knew that Superman was doing an admirable job already in trying to clear his name, it was far from easy. Not many people were willing to forgive Superman for being used to invade their world by Darkseid. Even though it had already been known that Superman had been brainwashed and was not himself. All right, where do we stand with Superman? One spoke. Still all right, Chief. But not everyone in Metropolis is going to let it go. I know that, but we know that he's been working his butt off to clear his name, and I can even see the lines on his face, and I don't leave the office until 5. We could at the very least help him out so he does not have to go all out. Unknown to Perry, Clark was smiling as he knew that at least here in his workplace, he had a good number of supporters. Lois being one of them, which helped him deal with a lot of things. Part of him wanted to tell her the truth that he and Superman were the same, but if experience was anything to go by. If she knew who he really was and others found out about it, they would be gunning after her in no time flat. And he was not in the mood for them to attack the woman he happened to be very much attracted to. Lois turned and noted the smile on Clark's face and smiled a bit as she nudged him gently on the ribs. You okay there, Smallville? Clark turned and nodded a bit while smiling. Yeah, I am fine. Just thinking about how Superman must feel to have supporters here in the planet. Yeah. He's done a lot for the city and the people, so he does deserve to have allies here, right? Plus he's OT lied before to anyone either, so we won't lie about him. Not like the other news stations have been doing lately. Before anyone could say anything though, one of the staff came into the office and shouted out. Chief, we got news. The assembled reporters turned and Perry spoke next. What's going on? We've heard that some of the people in the streets have seen a guy moving around the city in the air. Who? That was when another voice came on the scene, outside the window of Perry's office. That would be me, Datbeo. The assembled group of reporters and one disguised Kryptonian turned as Nay to the window, and there sure enough was the Hokage, decked in full attire and crouching on the ledge and giving them a wave. He looked at Lois and seemed to smile at her and winked at the same time. That made Lois raise an eyebrow and a frown from Clark as Perry spoke to the man before them all who was disguised. You're the Hokage. What are you doing here in Metropolis? What? A guy can't talk. A tour of the cities every now and then just cause he wears a mask. I won't be here long, so don't worry. I ain't here to upstage Superman either. I am just here to see the city and the rest of the country. But if there's anything happening down there that ain't good, then I won't hesitate to help. See ya. Naruto turned and then unleashed his chakra chain, and the energy chain soon got to a nearby building. Digging into the concrete, and off he went, swinging away off to the rest of the city. Leaving behind a group of people who were surprised at the appearance of a hero who was supposed to be based only in the LA area. Clark had managed to see through the mask and was surprised to see that the Hokage was actually a teenager who looked to be at least 17 or younger, at least as far as he was able to see. In hindsight, that made the Hokage not much older than Kara in a sense, and he decided to get a chance to talk to the youth, but not before going to get some help. He did appreciate the fact that the Hokage seemed to be the kind who helped others, but he was not going to take any chances too early until he knew the young man more. Already the reporters moved out and the Dale Y Planet were on the move to see if they could track and pin down the Hokage, and find out just what was the reason he was here in Metropolis. They were not the only ones, however, as one certain RRUPT but intelligent businessman criminal mastermind was also interested on what was going on, now that his secretary had informed him of the sighting. This new hero was thought to have resided in L. Only so why he was here was a very interesting thing. And after seeing the abilities of this being, looking him over was going to be something that would be possibly worth the time and investment. In the city. The blonde moved through the city with chakra chains and wired kunai and then spotted what appeared to be a bunch of thugs robbing a bank. In broad daylight no less. He blown wonder. Just what was going through the minds of the criminals in Metropolis. They should already know that Superman called this place him, and from what he learned, the police here were top-notch when it counted. So why bother robbing the place when it was either going to be the cops or Superman and those with him that were going to come in and get you? Either they've gotten used to seeing him or thinking with all the things he's been doing, he is not going to be around. Closing parenthesis. The blonde Jinchuriki decided that now was the right time to at least halt this, and who knows, he might run into the heroes of the city in question later. He moved to the next building and once he used his chakra chain quickly moved to where the bank was and quickly tossed out some wire and grabbed one of the crooks as he flew overhead. The guy cried out as he was yanked off of his feet and was soon finding himself hanging over the street tied up in wire over a street pole. The group of thugs below looked up and saw Naruto as he was crouching over the pole and looking at them. The same could be said for the police as they had been expecting Superman, Supergirl, or Steel to be here, not this guy in a mask. One of the thugs shouted and aimed a shotgun as Naruto, and Naruto quickly flicked his hand and out came a shuriken that lodged itself right in the front of the barrel as he moved in, leaping at the man. The guy screamed like a little girl as Naruto knocked him down to the ground and was out like a light as the former Hokage made his move and rolled to land a solid rising side kick to the head of one of the thugs, sending him to the side and out cold like his buddy. The other guy tried to attack him with a hidden knife, but Naruto quickly got out a kunai and used the ring on the handle to catch said knife and with some quick movements move the blade away and disarm the guy, and then introduced an elbow charge into the guy's sternum. That sent the man down as Naruto quickly used the kunai he had to stab the guy next to him, but not in a fatal place as he nailed the guy to the wall. He turned to face the last robber, but that was handled well enough as the guy was now surrendering to the police. And for good reason as three figures appeared nearby. Naruto could not help but whistle as he was now face to face with none other than Supergirl herself, along with her cousin, Superman. He had expected one of them to turn up when that bank robbery was going on, but not both of them at the same time. As far as he could see, the Man of Steel was a lot more imposing in person than in the pictures. Though he noted some stress lines on his face and he did not look as healthy as his other pictures did, though he had seen some fairly new ones. No doubt he had been working non-stop to repair his good name and the effects were there for him to see. Naruto had to give this guy credit for that, and he smiled a bit underneath the mask he wore and gave them a wave. Well now, nice to finally meet Superman and company. Sorry about the mess, it wasn't my best effort, but at least they did not get far. Superman sighed a bit as he and the two others landed. Kara eyed the thugs a bit and was slightly surprised at how fast they had been taken down. She had heard of the Hokage in the news, but did not view it all that much, as she believed that if you've seen one meta-human, you've seen them all. Regardless of the powers. It was not that she was against them or anything, but she was used to meeting them a lot, so she was a bit used to it. Steel on the other hand was Kiryu's how this new guy got here and somehow avoided revealing himself to anyone until now. The guy looked to be alright, but Steel was not going to rely entirely on first impressions. Superman then stepped forward and spoke to the Hokage, and Naruto wondered just what was it that the man was going to talk to him about. How old are you, Hokage? That was something that Naruto was not expecting for a moment. Until he recalled something about Superman. Apparently he had some form of powerful vision. Some rumors said that it allowed him to see through things. That was rumors, but if there was one thing Naruto knew to be true, sometimes rumors were a bit too close to the truth. Everyone thought that Rinnegan was a mutation and was not going to come back again the world, but it did in Nagato, Toby, and Madara. Everyone thought that the Jubi and the Sage were stories and they turned out to be true, so if this guy had the ability to see through things, then he was not going to take a chance and think that it's not possible. Why are you asking Superman? Clark sighed a bit and spoke. You look to be around at least 16 or something, shouldn't you be in school or something instead of risking your life? You should not doing these things as if it's a fantasy thing kids have in their heads. Naruto felt a tick rise to the side of his head at that comment. Sure, he looked young due to his bloodline, senjutsu training, and the QB's chakra, but being called or at the least implied as being a kid was a bit too darn annoying for his liking. He would have found it funny and would have joked about it or laughed it off. But being called a kid as if he was a newbie in fighting was annoying to him. He wasted no time and got into the face of Superman, surprising him, Steel, and Supergirl. As not many people would do that to him, and it seemed that some of the people who had cameras were also surprised and half expected the two heroes to get into a fight. What did you call me? Something about the tone in the Hokage's voice told Clark that he had taken offense to that, and seeing the angry expression through the mask with the X-ray vision confirmed it. That was enough information to tell Clark that he should try to talk to the young man and resolve this before it got ugly. Look, I didn't want to sound offensive to you since I have seen you in action already on the news from LA, you're rather young to be doing this kind of thing. You can do a lot better things before you try taking into this kind of life, you know. Naruto then pointed to Supergirl and spoke seriously. She isn't a bit too young for this line of work. Supergirl was a bit annoyed. Or rather, very annoyed at the guy pointing at her. Sure, she was rather young by Argonian terms, but she had already done her fair share of crime fighting and had even helped in stopping Darkseid's invasion, along with stopping her cousin when he was brainwashed and went rogue. To be pointed at and called a kid by EU arrival was something she was not too keen on, and she made that clear as she stomped over to the blonde Hokage and spoke. Who are you calling a kid, Buster? Naruto was not too put out as being Glar. Edited by a rather attractive blonde-haired and blue-eyed female, and her choice of outfit was not too bad a thing, and he could understand the reaction as he would have reacted the same way. But he was not going to let that stop him from saying his piece. He was no longer a kid and had more than enough years to be as cranky and serious as he wanted. You look to be around what, 16 or 17? 17's my age and I am no kid. I've been doing this for a while now and I am no slouch. Well, neither am I, and for your information, I am no kid. If there's anyone around here who's been getting on in the years, that would be me. Clark was curious about that as he looked once more at the young man whose mask he could see through with his X-ray vision. The guy looked to be around the age he had seen, though he noted some signs of experience, so maybe calling him a kid was a bit of a mistake, and he did show age on his whiskered face. But he also noted that his eyes, which were deep blue, also spoke of something old and experienced, so maybe he might have jumped the gun, as it were. That was lost to Supergirl, who was not using her X-ray vision as she was still locked eye in a glaring match with Naruto, while Steel was looking on, trying to get a feel of the situation and possibly try to defuse it before it got worse. But before anything could happen, there was a large explosion off in the distance, and that got the attention of the group as Clark spoke. This will have to wait, we need to go and find out what just happened. But, Kara, now is not the time, we need to check this out. We can talk with Hokage about this at a later date. Kara sighed reluctantly and gave the blonde shinobi a glare as she was soon joining her cousin as Clark turned to face Naruto. Listen, I can understand that you want to do this to help or be recognized, but you're still new to this kind of life, so try to live a normal life, okay? As the heroes left, Naruto glared at Clark. He knew the guy meant well. But if he had even the slightest idea of what he had been through, what he said was not going to count for much. Naruto had lived a life that would have made most young men and women who were just regular folks quake in their shoes, and had faced so many life or death situations that had he been a regular kid, as Superman had put it, he would have either been given an early funeral, sent to child services, or considered mentally unstable. Live a normal life? Huh. I'd rather not, thank you very much. And I am not doing this to be recognized, at least not yet. Closing parenthesis. Naruto was tempted to go ahead and let them deal with whatever it was that got their attention away from him, but something was tagging his senses and telling him to go and see things through. Besides that, he was rather eager to see just how good Superman, Supergirl, and Steel were in action. Now to see if these people, or whatever they are as good as the newspapers make them to be. Closing parenthesis. The blonde Shinobi quickly tossed out a kunai connected with metal wire to a nearby wall which was reinforced by his chakra. Once the kunai bit hard into the wall, he began to move up and swing to the wall. Once he got there, he clamped onto the wall with chakra and began to move quickly from building to building by using another kunai. This process was not as fast as his chakra chains of the flying thunder god jutsu of his father. But it was going to help him a lot and keep his real power hidden away from those who managed to take a look at him. As he made it there, he spotted a large number of POPLE gathering and saw that there were several armored trucks that were smoking, telling him that this was like that event he had dealt with before. He moved up to a high tower and looked to observe how the two cousins and their armored-to-the-skin companion were doing. They seemed to be doing fine with the bank robbers as the two super-powered siblings crashed in and blocked the bullets from the men. Naruto knew what guns were and had to admit that they scared him a bit since they were faster moving and therefore harder to block, but he knew that they made quite a racket and needed to be maintained more than most even if one had bought the attachments to silence them. He found that out by checking out a gun owner's magazine when he decided to find out just what were those strange devices used by the police and the robbers he had fought with before. Superman and Supergirl took the hits and the bullets merely bounced off of them, and the same could be said for Steel's armored form. The first two were a bit surprising to Naruto, and the second was to be expected since the guy had a lot of plating on him. Naruto watched the trio and saw that they were doing all right in the blow. NDE cousin of Superman was proving not to be a slouch when it came to socking bad guys in the jaw. But that was when two green beams smashed into Superman and he could hear the pain coming from the guy in blue and red. That shout was just the beginning as Superman was sent flying back into one of the armored cars. He could already hear the results of the Man of Steel being sent flying away from his comrades as Supergirl called out to her cousin in shock. He watched as she turned to find out who attacked them, but got her own answer as another pair of beams came at her direction. She managed to fly up, but the shooter hit her and she too hit the ground fast and hard and she was also in pain. Steel turned and sure enough out came the enemy as Naruto himself got to see him. And he was definitely different. There was a torn face there and yet the rest of him was all metal, wires, and a host of other glowing parts that Naruto had no idea about. At first he thought he was looking at an all-metal version of the combat puppets used by Suna Ninja and Gaara's brother Kankuro, but as he stretched his chakra senses a bit, he was surprised to find that there was some life in that being. And in the back of his mind, he felt the QB stir in him. He watched as that guy with the metallic body fought with Steel, and for a moment or so, it seemed that they were evenly matched. That is, until the living being of metal managed to sidestep a strike to the head and kick Steel in the stomach. The sound of metal hitting metal made even him wince from where he was and he wondered if Steel was still alive. The guy was and seemed to be still able to take the fight to his foe as he swung that massive sledgehammer again. The strike hit the metallic being and sent him crashing into a nearby van and it seemed to be over. But that was until the guy came back and tossed a massive steel slab at Steel. The man managed to smash it aside with his hammer, but that was the opening. The guy needed to charge in and hit Steel with a kick to the chest and followed with a knee and a serious right hook. Superman and Supergirl tried to get up but then the guy fired the same green-colored beams at both of them and Naruto saw both Superman and Supergirl take the hits and cry out in pain. The metal being came closer and it was there that Naruto noted the man's chest open to reveal a large glowing green rock and that seemed to throw his senses off a bit, telling him that glowing hunk of stone was a lot more dangerous than it looked. The state of the heroes was pretty bad, so now it was time for him to move as he now recalled just how this figure was. Metallo was pleased as he was now going to finally eliminate the two thorns to his side. Steel was a problem if he was not watched. But as soon as Supergirl and Superman were out of the way, that armored man was done for. And he could not help but relish the weakened and pained looks of both cousins as he taunted them. You both are finally going to be gone from here. And maybe I can finally get the chance to rule over this damned city once I dispose of a certain backstabbing businessman. Now let's get down to me getting rid of you both permanently. Before he could finish his rant of the heroes, Metallo felt several rather sharp scrapping sounds and he turned to see some sharp metallic discs burying themselves into the concrete and soon he spotted Naruto himself. Metallo growled at his new attacker and spoke to Naruto. So you're Los Angeles hero on the block, huh? The Hokage as they call you, what in the blazes are you doing here in Metropolis? The blonde in the meantime was a bit more silent, seeing this walking monstrosity of metal and whatnot made him remember the times he had to deal with ninjas who used puppets and also the story of Sakura's battle with Sasori himself. The worst however was when Toby used the bodies of dead ninja as his own puppets of war long ago. There had been a few other battles with ninjas willing to do anything for power in his time, even giving up their bodies to do so, and those kinds of people gave Naruto more than his fair share of headaches. This one, the one he read about as Metallo, was a totally different kettle of fish. But it was obvious that this guy was no pushover. Metallo was beginning to lose his cool and quickly grabbed a nearby pole from the road and tossed it like a spear at Naruto. Hey, it's considered bad manners to ignore someone asking questions. Naruto quickly took out one of his swords and channeled his chakra into it and cut the pole in half. Then quickly vanishing from sight, much to Metallo's surprise, and appeared behind him. And where I come from, Tin Man, it's twice as rude to be throwing spears at people. Metallo turned and saw the young man cock a fist at him, and he grinned, or tried to grin, as he was thinking that this guy did not have the strength to hit him as Superman would, and he made that obvious as he spoke. Go ahead, give me your best shot. He showed his metallic chin, expecting the arrogant but fast young man to be screaming in pain with a broken hand, wrist, and arm. What he did not expect is to be punched hard enough to literally send him flying backwards off his feet and smashing into the armored van. The van was caved in and sent back a bit, much to the surprise of the onlookers and to all three heroes, as they had not expected that. Clark had thought that the glowing sphere of energy was the reason he was able to cave in the truck from his debut on TV, while Kara and Steel had thought that few could knock Metallo like that. As for Metallo, he could not help but shake himself a bit and look at the young man, who did not even show any sign of pain in his punch, and he had to admit that he was no expecting that blonde to be that strong. As for Naruto, he silently thanked Sakura and Tsunade for the training in channeling chakra into his body to increase his overall strength. He had decided to test this attack and reserve his Senjutsu chakra if he needed an edge, or his purified QB chakra, since the latter was not ideal for something like this. And it seemed that he would not have to resort to that just yet. Which was a good thing to the blonde shinobi as he readied his sword to fight again. You've got some serious muscles there, Hokage. Always thought only Superman or his cousin could hit me that hard. But you can't harm me, I am indestructible. Yeah, I've heard that before, Metal Brain. You planning to fight or talk me to death? Metallo glared and got up, grabbed a large section of the armored car and quickly tossed it at Naruto like a frisbee, a razor-sharp and jagged metallic frisbee to be more accurate. Naruto wasted no time and quickly flipped over the attack and moved to face Metallo. The two attacked one another with fists and sword. Metallo proved to be rather tough to Naruto, as his sword was not cutting at all, and that made Metallo grin like a maniac as he taunted the blonde. See, your sword's useless against me. Naruto remained silent and quickly flipped back as Metallo decided to take a shot and charged right at Naruto, intent on giving the young man a serious punch to the jaw. Naruto, however, was quick on his feet and dodged the punch, rolled out of the way when Metallo tried a knee strike, and then flipped up to land a seriously strong chakra enhanced spinning side kick to the head of the cyborg and sent him forward and trying to balance himself. This allowed Naruto to quickly come up with a plan, and when it came to play, he charged at Metallo, who recovered and launched a fist at Naruto, who moved out of the way and dropped some smoke bombs. The bombs went off, but Metallo was able to recover, turn around and launch an attack at Naruto as the smoke was soon moving away. Nice move, Blondie, you might actually know how to be a ninja, but old trick don't work on one who has special vision. The attack caught Naruto in the stomach, and the blonde groaned as Metallo grinned at that, while the others looked on in shock and horror. Clark most of all, since he had tried to move and assist the Hokage in fighting Metallo, but the attacks Metallo had used had weakened him. The same could be said for Kara and for Steel. He was still trying to get his armor to recover from the attacks, and she was also trying to fight off the effects of the kryptonite blasts. But they and the others, including Metallo, were in for a surprise when Naruto looked up and grinned, speaking as if the attack did nothing to him at all. Too bad you were looking at the wrong Hokage, Tin Man. The people watched as Naruto's body suddenly poofed away, and there were large numbers of paper tags there with some form of writing. The tags were also suddenly burning, and before Metallo could react, the tags exploded with the force of several crates of TNT. Naruto had been busy enhancing the explosive qualities of his explosive tags recently, and the results of S8 changes were obvious as Metallo was sent flying backwards off his feet. He looked and was surprised to see Naruto above him and then release several kunai that were also tagged with explosive tags. These weapons quickly lodged in the area where his kryptonite heart was, and due to the enhanced explosions were enough to force the panels open. He hit the ground hard, and before he could react, Naruto was there with a very large sphere of glowing energy in hand as the blonde shinobi struck hard. "Take this in that rock heart of yours. Odama Rasengan." The very second the attack connected to Metallo's kryptonite heart, the blast was immediate and unleashed a massive cloud of debris all over the place. The ground shook with the force of a bomb going off, and there was a large scream coming from Metallo. The people who were there braced themselves and covered their eyes as the blast of wind and dust was everywhere. It took a while before the smoke cleared and there was a very deep crater on the ground. That was when they spotted Metallo being carried out by the Hokage on his shoulder as if he was a feather pillow, and then tossed aside, and in the area where the kryptonite heart was, it was not there anymore. The blonde looked about and then did some hand gestures, and then to the eyes of everyone in the area, there were several puffs of smoke and there appeared more of the Hokage. At least a dozen or more, as the middle spoke to them. "Go and find any of those rocks and get them all gathered." Hi. With that done, the other Hokages moved away as the apparent original moved to get to the three heroes. Kara tried to get up as she felt the effects of the kryptonite injuries fade away a bit more, but to her surprise, the Hokage then scooped her up in his arms bridal style and moved to a nearby bus shed that was not totaled by the fighting. That was something that no one expected to see, least of all Kara, who was blushing as she looked at Naruto. "You all right?" Kara said. Nothing, as she was still trying to get used to the fact that only minutes ago, she was trading barbs and glaring matches with this guy, and now she was rescued by said guy. She looked at him and gasped. Her weakened state used her X-ray vision to see him, and got another reason to blush when she saw Naruto's face, and she had to admit that he was rather good looking. Naruto had no idea why the super-powered blonde teen was turning red on the face, but he would have to be a liar to say that he did not find it rather attractive and amusing. It was only when he realized that, like her cousin Shish, he can have vision to see through things, so she must have seen his face, and that made him smirk mentally. But he managed to get his thoughts focused and spoke once more as they reached the bus shed. "Hey, not that I mind the looking and all, but I asked if you were all right." "Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Just need to rest up a bit more." Naruto grinned behind his mask, and as soon as he looked away, the Kage Bushin were coming back. Keeping in mind how the two flying heroes reacted to the rock of green, he made sure to ask something to the recovering Superman who was with them now, as Steel was back on his feet. And apparently alive and breathing to boot. "You have anything that can shield you from that glowing rock powering Tin Man over there?" "Yeah, it's lead, that's the only stuff that can block the kryptonite radiation." "Huh, so that's the name of said rock. All right then, I'll just have my buddies take it a long distance away, and when you recover enough, they will tell me where they hid it so you can get that lead stuff you need." Clark had no idea how that was possible and was about to ask when Naruto spoke to him once more while pointing at a very tall building at the distance. "They said that they placed all of the pieces in a very large bag on that tower over there, can you see it?" Clark did so, and sure enough, the bag was there, held by metallic wire, and he could see that the kryptonite was there in the bag, so he was assured that the man was not hiding it from him and the others. "Yes, I can." "Good, see you Superman. Or should I call you Clark Kent?" Clark's eyes widened at Had as he turned around to face Naruto, and it took a lot of his willpower to not react to the fact that the Hokage had just figured out. But as he did so, all he saw was a swirling circle of leaves as Naruto was no longer there. The only thing he saw was a note which was sealed with the man's leaf signature. He took it up and saw that there was a message. To Superman, Clark Kent. "Don't worry about your identity. I am not telling anyone, since I can tell that you are a good man and you carry a lot of burdens on your shoulders, namely that incident with that, Dark. Whatever that alien nutjob's name is. I might sound weird, but I know what it's like to be treated with disdain and suspicion, and I know the desire to work hard to prove yourself that you are a different person and not what others think you are. I read all there is to know about you before and after that, and I have to say, you have a lot of guts and grit. I like that a lot. You could have used your powers to do what you like and kick the law on the ass. I know how that goes since I used to give the law the finger when I was younger. But you used your powers for the right reasons, and I learned to fight for a better purpose than just pulling pranks and causing mischief. That's why I respect you, so I promise to you as a ninja and as the Hokage I will not reveal your identity to anyone for as long as I live. I wish you the best in what you do, Datbayo. P.S. This note is going to burn up, so I suggest you drop it. I'm not kidding, by the way. The special seal I put in it kicks in a minute after that note's opened. Clark then was surprised when the note did burst into flame, which quickly reduced it to ash, and he could not help but shake his head as Kara walked up to him. What happened? Where did he go? Clark shook his head and spoke to Kara in private. He knows who I am. Kara's eyes widened as she digested that bit of information. Clark's part of being Superman had been one of the best kept secrets they both had. And now it seemed that someone else knew about it. How did that even happen in the first place? She looked at her cousin and spoke to him as calmly as she could possibly manage. How did he do it? I don't know. But he said he was not going to reveal it. And for some reason I get the feeling that he is telling the truth, Kara. Are you sure, Clark? For all we know he was lying to make you lower your guard or something. I know, but the fact is that he went out of his way to get that kryptonite away from us, and if he wanted to reveal how he knew who I really am, he could have done it the very second he found out about it. All we can do is see if he is going to do what he promised. Later, Naruto was back in his hotel and had taken all of his clothing, weapons, and AR. More back into the storage scrolls and sat down to begin meditating to heal himself with Senjutsu chakra. The battle with that Metallo guy was definitely a step above the norm. The only thing he felt could come close was the battle his wife Sakura, alongside the old lady of Tsunochiyo, with the Akatsuki member and puppet prodigy Sasori. That kind of foe was something that Naruto was not fully prepared for. But he had to admit that the battle was interesting. And it seemed that as he recovered from the injuries, the QB, or rather Kurama, agreed with him. Finally we get to have a chance to fight a decent fight. That metallic being in human form was a far better challenge than those punks and low-level wretches we dealt with before. Closing parenthesis. You seem happy all of a sudden, Kurama. Closing parenthesis. Weren't you listening to me, brat? If this is but one villain, then perhaps this world can be challenging after all. Closing parenthesis. Well, I'm glad you approve, because if that battle was any indication, this world's got a lot more in store for us. Closing parenthesis. About bloody time too. This place was getting boring. Say, why don't we try and see if we can handle facing that Superman in a sparring match? That should make sure you see. And get the damned rust in your joints to leave. Closing parenthesis. You want to run that by me again, Kurama? You want me to face Superman in a match? You realize that the guy's got cage-level chakra in him, even too. The point, he's got the chakra level to be close to a Jinchuriki in initial form. And he's not even a human to boot. He's not even an enemy of ours or a criminal, and you want me to fight him? Don't be such a wuss, Naruto. You haven't had a decent workout of a fight for weeks to a month here in this world. Even back there in where we came from, the fights have been few and far in between. You might train your butt off every now and then, but nothing beats fighting an actual opponent, and even Kage Bushin will not cut it anymore. Besides, it's a sparring match, not a death match, you blonde-haired dolt. And you have to admit that fighting someone like that is something that can really be a good way to get you back to shape. Closing parenthesis. I cannot believe I just heard you say that. Let's just focus on staying off the radar for now. The less likely we get attention to ourselves, the better. Closing parenthesis. Now I am the one who is shocked. You actually want to stay off the radar. What happened to the blonde old who loved to get attention whenever he could? He grew up, and I were to recall, you approved of it. Closing parenthesis. Point taken. So we're going to just stay here in the city then? No, I'm off to see the rest of the world. Maybe Gotham City. Heard the place should be interesting. Closing parenthesis. The QB seemed to accept that, and while Naruto could tell that Kurama was now taking another nap, he could tell His resident Biju was mumbling about the chance to finally find some new and worthy foes to fight. And truth be told, he was actually looking forward to the chance to finally fight some worthwhile foes as well. For now, however, he decided to lay low and just observe while writing more of his stories before packing it up and going to Gotham City. He was also going to check out just what other villains were out there in the city to see just what he could dig up, as well as possibly find some more inspiration, as his old sensei and godfather used to call it. Once he felt fully recovered, he went back to writing as he began to recall some of his adventures with his allies back in his world, plus he recalled just who he had seen, namely a certain reporter lady, and Superman's cousin. For the rest of the week, Naruto remained incognito, a feat that Kurama was still trying to grasp considering the way Naruto acted in their world, and had focused only on making his next set of books. And also on that story that was based on his life. He did on occasion go out to see the rest of Metropolis and also take a peek at what else he could see as well as who else. On one occasion, he got to tangle with none other than Livewire, formerly known as Leslie Wilkins. The female villain had been terrorizing some of the residents and trying to cause mayhem when he decided to step in while wearing his full costume, armor, and weapons, and while Livewire laughed at his looks a bit, he was on full combat mode. He decided to use a jutsu he took years to develop to counter Livewire's ability to use electricity, which was similar to the lightning armor used by the 5th Raikage A. The wind moved at extreme speeds around him and even gave him the ability to fly, which was something that Livewire did not anticipate, and it seemed that while he was from another world, the principles of chakra-controlled elements seemed to work here still, as he was able to handle some if not all of her attacks. He then used his water jutsu that he spent a lot of time learning from both Kakashi when his Jonin sensei was still alive and also from Mei, who taught her use of water jutsu to him. He unleashed a powerful series water blasts to force her back and then unleashed a wave of Mizubushin. That was no mean feat since water-based chakra was not his type, but it worked as Livewire was shorted out and he left the scene. But not before leaving a note to Superman. Once he got back to the hotel, he bemoaned the fact that during the battle, his cloak got singed a bit by a lightning blast from the crazy woman. Though Kurama replied that it was a small price to pay to face a new and interesting foe. He kept his promise and did not reveal Clark's role as Superman, and when he finally decided to leave Metropolis, he went back to the planet in Henge, as a delivery guy, made his way to where Clark's desk was and left another note. One that said that he was now leaving the city and still intend to make sure that he will keep his promise of not compromising Clark's secret. As he left to the elevators, he passed none other than Clark and Lois and merely grinned secretly as he went down the elevator and spotted Clark as he read the note. Once he was out of the planet, he headed off to get his things, check out of the hotel and make his way to the nearest airport. He was rather curious about those things and hoped that it was not going to be a bad ride. Just what and who he was going to find in Gotham was still unknown, but he could bet 10 to 1, it was going to a man dressed like a bat and fought like a ninja. If he was lucky, and since he had the luck of the devil as some of his friends and family called it, he had no doubt he was going to meet the Dark Knight. On what set of circumstance though he had no idea. Gotham Airport. A large plane was now making its way to land on the runway at the Gotham City Airport, and just as it was releasing its landing gear, out came a figure holding to one of the tires and soon landed outside of the field near the runway. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze dusted himself off and soon got on his way to get away from the authorities and go see the rest of the city. He was still wearing his usual gear as he hid and quickly changed his looks with hair dye color and henge. He also made sure to check his laptop and UBS drives, and was pleased to see that they were all working nicely. Once that was done, he moved past the airport's field, leapt over the fences, and moved towards the city. Moving into Gotham City in the closing hours the afternoon was already giving the city something of a gothic look, and he could not help but feel a bit spooked out by it. He had read the files on the city, and while it had its fair share of fun places and things to do, the criminal elements in the city were literally flowing around like water. And a number of the said criminals were all crazy and completely unlike anything he had dealt with back in L.A. One such foe was known as the Riddler, who seemed to enjoy making all these wacky but deadly word puzzles that usually drove the people who were his victims. He had no plans on Minchi ing words with a guy like him since he was in no mood for wasting time on some crazy and lethal scheme. He placed those thoughts aside as he moved into the city. The first thing he did was go to a NEA/RBY cafe and decided to grab some food and some drink. As he sat down, he decided to check out the news, which was thankfully being played on a nearby TV set. In the current news today, billionaire Bruce Wayne will be attending a special charity ball for the Gotham City Police Department Veterans Fund. This has been Bruce's second appearance in the ball and has shown his support for the Gotham PD. Naruto looked at this man named Bruce Wayne and he could see that he was all smiles and working hard in front of the camera. He had a feeling that this guy was hiding something, a pain of some sort, but he decided that it was not his business since despite playing what he suspected was a role, Bruce was very genuine in his actions when he presented an award to the police officers who were there on the stage. For now, however, Naruto's concern was on what else was in the news. And it was not going to be long before the news turned to something that he felt is a lot more important to listen to. In other news today, the criminal known as the Penguin has been transferred once more to Arkham Asylum following his latest attempt to steal a number of priceless relics from a recent excavation in South America what were being stored in the Gotham Museum. The former socialite turned criminal was foiled by Batman and Robin during his attempt, and while it had been a difficult chase, he and his henchmen were apprehended and locked up by the two, as well as preventing damage to the relics. Single quote. Images of the criminal in question actually made Naruto raise an eyebrow. This guy was nowhere near as freaky as that Akatsuki swordsman named Kisame, or that snake-summoning bastard Orochimaru, and that zombie bounty hunter of Akatsuki who was the victim of his prototype Rasenshuriken decades ago. But this penguin guy certainly looked like the flightless bird he read about in the internet and at the library he at times went to just to keep himself informed, and like the ones he had seen near the land of snow, spring. But unlike said birds that he found to be funny and at times cute, this guy was downright creepy and also looked like someone who not only needed to be on a diet but needed to spend a whole life sentence on a deserted island and away from the populace. There's an idea, maybe I should to the Hirishin technique and take all the bad guys to an island way off the map and let them figure out just how they are going to survive. Closing parenthesis. But despite how tempting the idea was, he decided to place it aside for now since that was no doubt going to be a problem. The methods in which this world dealt with criminals confused him at times since in his reality, criminals were usually divided into two categories with different punishments. The civilian criminals back in his world usually dealt in a fashion by the cage and were punished depending on the severity of their crimes. Though that was only in the hidden villages, and those who were not part of the hidden villages were dealt with by those who were placed into positions of power by the feudal lords and by civilian officials. The other category of criminals were the missing nin who were quickly placed on the bingo book. This book was the source of information on renegade ninja and just what were their crimes and the bounties that were placed on them by the officials. Of course, the bingo book was different for each land. And while there were criminals listed there were also enemy ninjas who had done things to warrant them being placed in the bingo book. And usually ninja who encountered ninjas who were listed in said bingo book would be given the authority to take them down, either for capture or kill. But that was not recommended for ninja who were high-ranked, S-ranked ninja in the bingo book. Were to be engaged with extreme caution. A large number of highly skilled ninja were assembled, or when the ninja pursuing said target was an S-ranked ninja as well. Naruto decided not to delve in to that any further as he decided to go and finish his food and drink. Once his food was there before him, he went to work and enjoyed his food as best he could. He would have gone for ramen, but this was good enough, and besides, he had no idea if there was a ramen stand anywhere in the city. Hence the need for him to get a map and explore the city soon. He also kept his senses alert on the chance that some nut might decide to try and rob the place. The last thing he wanted was a replay of his time in that place in L.A. Thankfully, it seemed that the majority of criminals that called Gotham their home had other ideas or had bigger fish to fry. As soon as he was done and paid his bill, he moved out to find a place to call home, though he had an idea that he was willing to try just to make sure that he did not get into trouble. He decided to find a nice place to call his base of operations and get there to do some work on what he was going to do in Gotham, but he had a feeling that sooner or later He was going to meet some very interesting people. But before all of that, he needed to get some shut-eye, tour the city a bit, and when he got a map, go out and do some aggressive recon. Not to mention do some shopping to buy some new supplies and equipment with his money that he might be in need of in the future. Ellipsis. Back in Metropolis, Clark Kent normally was very calm and level-headed, but today he was a bit tense. Or rather more than tense, try impatient. As much as he was relieved that no one on the planet had gotten a tip about his identity, or anyone in the other news and gossip agencies. That did not make him feel any better. The Hokage had pretty much faded away from the scene as he had only made very few appearances in Metropolis before being gone for at least 2 weeks. Perry had been trying to find leads since he was curious as to who this hero was and why was it he was moving about the world when he should be in L.A. Clark was happy that his identity was not exposed. But that did not mean that the discovery that someone else apart from his family and Batman, Bruce, knew he was Superman was not easy to deal with. Kara was insistent that they find The Hokage and get some details straight and find out just how he found out his identity. And she had good reasons, but so far, the man was off the radar and not a single sighting of him had been made. Most would have thought that the Hokage had gone back to L.A., but there was no sighting of him there either, so that meant that he was still moving around. Where are you, Hokage? Clark was tempted to go to Bruce and see if he had possibly heard of this Hokage, since he knew Bruce would want to keep an eye on matters that were of concern. But he decided against it since there had been no mention of the Hokage in Gotham, and if he was there, Bruce would have informed him, even more so since Bruce would not be the kind to let someone just appear in his city. For now he was busy with his life as Clark Kent, and he intended to keep it that way. But the best he could hope for was a chance to learn more about the mysterious Hokage and how he had learned about his true identity. And if possible, hear about any new happenings that can be linked to the blonde masked figure who had deduced his identity. Ellipsis. 2 days later, Naruto was in his combat clothing and was now moving over the building as he ran over the rooftops of the city. The shinobi could not help but admit that the city was filled to the brim with activity, most of the time the nightlife were the negative kind. But he was keen to see just what the city was going to be like and possibly run into any of the criminals. As he got over another building, he began to run up the nearby wall and got to the top and scanned the city. He looked around his current location and then sat down on the cross-legged position and began to summon the natural energy, and found to his slight disgust that the energy here in the city was more than a bit tainted. Industry normally did not bother the natural flow of energy, but the ninja noted that heavily industrialized cities had a tendency to taint the natural energy in and around their area. But he placed that out of the side since now was not the time for him to think about the mess. He was in senjutsu mode in a mere moment and began to scan the chakra signatures in the city. There were a lot of them and it was going to be a bit before he sorted them out, and he decided to get on the move and see just what and possibly who he was going to see. He moved over some of the buildings and soon he spotted the flashing lights that were red and blue, the universal color of the police in his experience. And judging by the number of said lights, this meant that something was going down. And he had a feeling that he might meet Batman or possibly some of the more colorful criminals. He had managed to get a dossier of the criminals that called this Gothic city home. What Gothic meant he had absolutely no clue. His files on the criminals that called this place home had some very interesting people. One was a man going by the name of Bane. A guy who was one heck of a bodybuilder and had a serious use for a drug called venom. Seeing an image of that guy had him thinking about all the muscle-bound ninja he had fought before, who despite their size, sometimes had some wicked speed. Apparently he was also rather smart, a deadly mix of brawn and brains, though he was supposedly a mercenary assassin. Naruto had little liking for that kind despite his people being trained as assassins, they only got to that stage if they were contracted to kill someone who was very important or too dangerous, and they usually were allied to the village. Mercenaries were looked down on by a good number of loyal ninjas since they were highly untrustworthy and certainly not someone one worked with unless they had some very steep pockets. Even the samurai in the Land of Iron hated them, and those of their group who did turn rogue and become mercenaries were treated even worse. Still, fighting the guy was going to be promising. The other guy was man who went by the name of Joker. A deranged madman who dressed in the worst getup Naruto had ever seen. Guy who wears makeup, and also clothes of green and purple as well as acting like a super creepy version of Orochimaru. What kind of sick nut acts like that and dresses like that in public? Still, this guy certainly had brains to mix with the craziness, having held Gotham for ransom more even once and had really given a lot of the police headaches in trying to deal with him. And the way this guy treated his victims filled the former Hokage with a great deal of disgust, and that was something since Naruto usually tried to change people with the marked exception of those who are truly irredeemable. If he was given a chance, he would silence the bastard personally, but for now he was going to let Batman deal with the nut. There were others, but these two were certainly interesting. The first was Selena Kyle, who was a very attractive blonde woman who could easily turn heads and make most men who had little control over themselves drool or think less than gentle thoughts. He however could tell that she was not just a luscious figure and a pretty face, she was known as Catwoman. A thief who certainly had the looks to suit the name. She was a woman who advocated the protection of animals, namely cats, and before she had been arrested, had been a high roller in Gotham society and courted by a lot of guys. One of them being said playboy Bruce Wayne. She was apparently caught by Batman, and despite being a thief, she seemed to be willing to fight other criminals, as she had tangled a terrorist group with Batman that eventually led to her being captured by said man. All because she wanted to stop them from taking land that was to be a nature preserve. And while she was released on probation for stopping said terrorists, there was no doubt in Naruto's mind that this was one woman he disliked the idea of being kept locked away. Even if he had only done some preliminary research on her. His time in being a Hokage and his years of experience told him that she was possibly getting frustrated at not being allowed to live the way she wanted to live. And that was something he could relate to, since he had always been placed in a situation where he could not be himself. Still, stealing was stealing and considered to be a crime in this reality as well as his own th. How if she stole from corrupt and foolish criminal bosses and high society people, then he was not going to stop her in any way, shape or form. Only when she harmed others who were not even part of the problem would he stop her if he met her. The next person was a certain woman who had one heck of an unhealthy obsession with plants, and had the more than fitted name of Poison Ivy. The woman was named Drive Pamela Isley, and was rumored to have been one heck of a botanist in her day and cared a great deal for nature. She apparently had been involved in some form of accident that somehow gave her the ability to command plants, release some form of pheromone that could arouse people and create poisons of a sort in her own body. The one thing that he did not like was said accident supposedly made her unable to have kids. Which, as far as he knew, was a fate most women would have considered worse than death. Still, the woman was undeniably attractive, especially with that getup she usually wore when she did her work. Now that is one heck of a killer babe with a green thumb. Closing parenthesis. Poison Ivy had more than her fair shares of being stopped by Batman and had been locked up in a place called Arkham Asylum. This place was some sort of hospital and holding center for the criminally insane and dangerous. In his mind, the nuts he dealt with would have felt right at home there, Toby and Kabuto included. The difference was with this green-loving babe was the fact that unlike the other loons and scum, she had no interest in money and usually did her actions to attack people who had committed actions that were attacks on nature, at least to her perspective. And when the word attack was used, that included using lethal force, either with her poisons or her pet plants. She was also rumored to be friends with one criminal woman going by the name of Harley Quinn. But so far he had no idea who she was at the moment, so that was going to be placed aside for the time being as he saw that there was some activity at the other side of the city. He spotted a figure moving through the shadows, and since Batman was recorded to have a cape, this was not Batman as he did not see a cape. He moved quickly and quietly as best he could while keeping to the shadows to make sure that he did not alert his quarry. Once he was close enough, he spotted the figure break into a nearby tower. It looked like it belonged to some very rich fellow. And when he managed to get a glimpse of his target once the figure came back out, he could not help but grin behind his mask. Hello. Ellipsis. At said tower, Selena sighed as she took the jewels and placed in her sachet. She had half expected Batman to show up again to stop her, but with Bane causing havoc alongside Riddler as she had heard on the police band wave, the chances of that happening were slim. And despite the fact she knew that she was skirting the limits of her probation from being Catwoman, this was one chance she was not going to let go. Besides, the necklace belonged to a businessman who she knew made his money over the trade of tiger skins, so double impact for her. The beautiful cat burglar patted the bag and spoke with a measure of relief as she knew that she was in the clear. "Looks like I'm finally getting away scot-free tonight." That was when another voice came on the scene behind Selina. "You might want to rethink that statement, miss." Catwoman turned and there behind her was a man dressed in an outfit of orange and black, like a ninja, and wearing a black short-sleeved trench coat with red flames on it. He guy wore a mask and some form of headband with a metal plate on the front and had a strange leaf-like symbol on it. She raised an eyebrow since the man was actually standing on a nearby pole, upside down. And she could tell that there was nothing holding him on said pole, which made her all the more curious. And while she knew the saying, "Curiosity killed the cat," she knew cats had 9 lives as a saying too. Naruto grinned again behind his mask as he got a very good look at Selina Kyle and spoke once more. "Considering the getup you have, I can wager a safe bet you're Catwoman. And I can easily say the name does you justice." Selina was curious who this guy was, as this was definitely not Batman, and most certainly not Robin or that one named Nightwing, and decided to speak next. "And who are you?" "I'm the Hokage. And before you ask why I am here, I'm taking a tour of the city, just to see what this place is like. And as far as I can see, the nightlife is pretty exciting, and despite the fact I am upside down, the view before me is certainly nice." Selina could easily see this guy was actually flirting with her, a surprise since that did not happen often. Usually it was her who did the flirting, though only to distract people such as Batman when she felt it was better to flee than stay. She decided to smile back and watch as the man moved away from the pole, walking on it, and then moving to flip and land on the ledge like a skilled acrobat. That made Selina raise an eyebrow, as that was rather interesting and, despite herself, somewhat impressive. "Are you flirting with me, Hokage? I thought heroes like you usually waste no time catching crooks like me." Naruto mentally snickered at that and replied, "That's true, and I do plan to try and convince you to give those jewels back. But that does not mean I can't enjoy the company, right?" Selina raised an eyebrow at this guy. He was actually flirting with her, and maybe that could be his weakness. If he was easily attracted to her, then she might be able to play him. She smiled and beckoned to him with a finger. Naruto decided to do it, and as he was close, she spoke to him, while reaching for her whip. "Sure, but you should know something about cats, Hokage." "And what is that?" "We have sharp claws." Selina slashed at Naruto, and Naruto reeled back as she then attacked him with several attacks, managing to hit his mask and crack it, forcing him back until he moved away. That she felt the distance would do, and she quickly moved with her whip and left the scene. She moved as quickly as she can, unaware that Naruto was not dissuaded, but he merely grinned and soon reached for a special kunai of his. Ellipsis. As soon as she had some distance from the man on a rooftop and was near a tall wall on said roof, she looked back and saw that he was not following her. She sighed and spoke to herself. "He's not bad looking body-wise, but he's no Batman and did not even try to catch me." But she got a surprise when she too ran and was face to face with Naruto, who quickly moved forward until she hit the wall behind her and the mask fell off, revealing his face. Selina saw herself looking at a young but definitely handsome looking blonde with blue eyes that had a lupine quality. There were several whisker-like marks on his cheeks that added to the look, and his toothy grin revealed slightly sharper than normal canines. That made her feel some surprise, as she had not expected that, and despite the fact that his face was revealed, the Hokage did not seem to be troubled at all. Naruto then spoke to her. "Nice try, little cat, but I also go by another name, and that is Fox, and foxes like me are very cunning and we're damn persistent when we chase something. So, are we going to the part where we fight for real, or where you give up the jewels? Or you can try another way of making me lower my guard and get away with said jewels. All three sound really nice to me, though the third option might be more fun." "Nah." Naruto then sniffed a bit and grinned more as he spoke. "Nice perfume, by the way, certainly suits you, even more so with the sweat mixed in Catwoman. So what's it going to be?" That sent shivers up Selena's spine, even though she could not know why, or she thought she did, as this was the first time a man was this aggressive with her when it came flirting, as Batman was the impassive type. But she was Not going to let this chance to escape again slip. How this guy managed to get past her and be there was a mystery, but that had to wait. She gave him a grin and spoke once more while moving to press her hands on his chest. You're pretty good there, Hokage, but aren't you worried that I know what you look like without your mask? Naruto did not seem fazed by that and replied. Don't think I don't know your real name, Catwoman. Or better yet, Miss Selena Kyle. I might look like a kid, but I assure you, I am no simple idiot. Besides, all it takes is for you to be revealed to have gone back to be in Catwoman and they lock you away for a long time and throw away the key. So, how are we going to play this? Selena managed to smile, yet she was not the least bit happy that she had been found out by this guy. Everyone who was in the know already knew that she was Catwoman, but she was still hoping to do this to live the way she wanted to live without anyone figuring out. But this guy had Zhu T caught her and now she was in trouble, unless she could convince him to let her go and forget that they ever met. You tell me, Hokage, you certainly know who I am, so you have me at a disadvantage. She ran her hand on his chest and then moved to his face, which despite her self-control, she found to be well formed and hardened, like Batman's, and she could not help but reach for the face as well. The marks on his cheeks made her wonder if it was merely tattoos or these were possibly inherited. Naruto grinned even more as Selena was doing her best to lay on the charm, and she was really going for it as it was. But he was already making his move while Selena was laying on the charm and decided to let this little cat and mouse, or rather cat and fox game come to an end, but not before seeing just how far he could take it. I know, so tell you what, why don't we try a competition? Oh, yep, here's how it's going to be. You try to rob a different place in 3 days without getting caught by Batman and the cops. But avoid me finding you. If I find you, try to evade me quickly and get to Pier number 19 in Gotham Harbor and avoid having me switch your loot with something else harmless but worthless to you while you try to fight or evade me. If you can do 3 times in a row, then you win and I will not bother you again, nor will I stop you from what you love doing. Selena raised an eyebrow at that and replied. Really? Care to tell me why, Hokage? Naruto grinned, and then to Selena's slight shock, the man touched her lips and her chin with his fingers and spoke with a very husky tone into her right ear. Way I see it, Miss Kyle, you're not a full-time villain. You don't kill, sell drugs, weapons, or people, kidnap and all those other things criminals do. You only rob people, and that usually pertains to corrupt, petty people who do something that offends you, and even if you do rob them, you don't kill unless you have no choice. And you also happen to have a kindness towards animals, if what I read about you is right on the money when it concerns wildlife, namely cats. Plus you did save this city from a terrorist attack, and that wins points in my book. The only time I may take offense to your passion for being the seductive thief that you are, is when you rob the hard-working, industrious, and actually respectable people in this city. You live your life the way you want. You want freedom and the chance to be yourself. I can respect that easily, since I want to have freedom too, in my own way, and not be forced by others to live the way they want me to live. In that sense, you can say that in some fashion, you and I are a bit similar, though I am no thief like you. If you want to keep doing this without being found out, try to keep up with me here, Catwoman. Alina had to admit that this was the first time she met someone who understood her lifestyle and her wants. However, she was still going to be very wary of him, since she knew that going in without saying all the angles was a bad idea from the beginning. And if you win, what then? Naruto then grabbed her by the hips with one hand, much to her surprise, though she hid it well, and spoke once more, as he touched her chin again with the other. If I win the first day, then I get to see your face. Sure, I've seen the pictures, but images don't do justice to seeing the face in the flesh, so to speak. Besides, it's only fair since you've seen my face already. And what happens on the second day if you win, Hokage? Naruto enjoyed that as he rubbed his left hand on her hip slowly before speaking. Simple, I ask you out on a date. And I'm paying. That made Selena raise an eyebrow, as that was something she did not expect. You want to ask me out on a date? Of course, a date, a simple lunch and dinner date, and I am paying this time with my own money. There's nothing in your files that say you can't have a social life, right? And no, I am not going to take you to bed or anything like that. I saint what to know you and why you chose this life. Since we're both in this case on opposing sides of a spectrum, I am just curious. And besides, I happen to have a high respect for women, so the only me I would take you to bed is if you allow me to, and only if you and I have enough time to know one another. You can always go home afterwards and I won't stalk you, just a willing man and woman on a social get-together. And the last day. Naruto laughed a bit and switched places with Selena as he was now on the wall, but this time he had both hands on his hips and moved them to her back. It made Selena take in a brief gasp of air as she looked at the man who was flirting with her in a very aggressive fashion. That's when I ask you to pose for a few pictures. That got Selena's attention, and in a not so good way as she looked at him hard and with a frown on her face. What did you say? Naruto laughed gently and replied. Not in that way, though a guy can certainly dream about it. No, just some pictures in a set of clothes that you can feel comfortable with. Knowing your social standing before you got busted as Catwoman by a certain tall, dark and brooding dude with a rather creepy attachment to flying mammals. You're bound to have a few dresses here and there. I would be lying though if I said that I don't like to see you in a swimsuit, 1 or 2 pieces up to you though. I recommend black since you would obviously look good in it. After that, I will pretty much leave you alone for the rest of the time I am here in Gotham, which might not be for very long anyway. And if I refuse, then you reveal to them that I was being Catwoman again, right? Pretty much, so, balls in your court, Catwoman. Selena decided to make her move as she smiled at the Hokage and moved to kiss him as she spoke to his lips while running her hands on his body again. You drive a hard game, but tell me, do you really think that you can win this competition? I caught you off guard, didn't I? Perhaps. But a cat always manages to escape, and this time, so will I. With that, she quickly pushed him back and took out a small number of smoke pellets and tossed it at Naruto. The smoke was blinding, but she quickly turned away and escaped. Or so she thought, as when she left the building, Naruto merely blew the smoke away with a blast of chakra-enhanced wind and moved to see Catwoman on the move yet again. But enjoyed the sight of her retreating form and whistled appreciatively at the view before turning around. He was going to let her go for now. After all, this was merely the foreplay and he had something to return as well. Later. Selena sighed a bit as she looked around, hoping that it was all over and she could finally get away with her prize. That Hokage guy, however, did not make it the least bit easy for her, as that was certainly something she had not readied herself for. The guy was both aggressive and rather forward, as he had actually responded with placing his hands on her hips and even had the audacity to touch her back. Plus that competition he had in mind. Get a grip, Selena, time to go, you've got the jewels. So the blonde thief was shocked when she checked her sachet and found that instead of the jewels she took, there was a stuffed frog doll in her pack and it had a letter in the chest. She took it off and saw that it was a message. Nice try, but better luck next time. And just so you know, this was a dry run. The real competition starts next week, or in this case, at least 4 days from now, so better shape up and get the rust of your joints, okay? Because you are about to get a heck of a workout. P.S. I'm sending the jewels back, and I will alert security this time, so feel free to come and get them if you want. Kiro. Selena turned and shook her head in slight anger and slight amusement. All this time, when she thought she finally had the advantage, that kid had actually switched the jewels with this plush toy, and she had thought that her actions had finally worked in letting her get away. But instead she was the one who got robbed, and despite her anger at what happened, she had to give the young man credit for the slip. Shish. He turned to see that there was no sign of the Hokage anywhere, meaning that he had escaped, and that meant that the competition was on between them. I am so not going to lose to you, young man. A day later. Naruto cracked a grin as he read the latest bit of news. Apparently the reason Batman was not around to catch Catwoman was he was dealing with Bane and Riddler. How those two managed to get themselves working together, he would never know, but he did not mind, and while Kurama had expressed a level of interest in fighting this Bane character, he turned down that idea. The thought of breaking into Arkham and being around all those loons and nutjobs just to find one supped-up criminal and fight him for the entertainment value was not in his mind right now. At the moment, he was currently on his way to grab some takeout food from where he was staying. The chance to bring a good meal into his guts was welcome, but he was annoyed by the fact that he could not find a decent ramen restaurant anywhere. The Gothamites as they were called seemed to be fairly interesting in his mind, and he was pleased to see that despite the fact that their city did not have a very stellar reputation due to the crime rates, they were proud of their home. Kurama however had a less than stellar liking for the city as he spoke. This place is one of the strangest cities thus far. Closing parenthesis. I suppose so. Anyway, we should get ready for another interesting night. Hope we can run into more company in the city. Closing parenthesis. HMPH, I hope that we can finally see just what this Batman is capable of. Anyway, are you sure that you did the right thing in letting that very attractive woman go like that last night? You mean Selina Kyle, right? Yeah, I mean seriously Naruto, she was fine, and certainly looks good in the clothes. Not like the women in your past, but certainly comes close. For all you know, both of you could have made quite a set, not to mention the fact that she would have been one heck of a lady in the sack. Closing parenthesis. I swear you sound like the pervy sage. Closing parenthesis. And that's supposed to be a bad thing. Considering the fact that you yourself are quite the pervert and don't bother denying it because we both know it's true. Besides, if you decide to go for it, your experiences when it comes to the bedroom might really make her happy. She might very well join you willingly since you don't happen to be so uptight with the law and all. Closing parenthesis. Huh. Yeah, well, no sense crying over spilled milk, as they say. Besides, we've got another week before we leave this place. And besides, that encounter is going to give me a lot of data to make the next novel. Closing parenthesis. Kurama snorted a bit and replied before going to sleep. Yeah, well, novels and books don't come close to doing the real thing with a woman. Or more than one woman, as you already know. Closing parenthesis. Naruto could not help but agree to the truth in Kurama's words. Nothing beat actually doing with it a willing woman, or in his case, more than one willing woman. Then again, even after being married, his former sensei Kakashi never got rid of the books, and Ayame certainly didn't mind. He was willing to wager a guess that Kakashi used the books that Jiraiya made to spice up his love life with Ayame. The blonde placed the thoughts aside as he ate his food and then headed back to his hideout to get some work done. The blonde shinobi was more than willing to get a chance to meet any other new figures in Gotham, though he was hoping to see if he was going to meet Batman and his crew to see just what this guy was about. Once he got to the hideout, he began to work and also planned something on the off chance he was discovered. Later that night, Naruto was currently using his Senjutsu chakra once more as he was on the highest tower in Gotham, while balancing himself on a thin sheet of marble on the tip of the tower. This allowed him to scan the city section by section since that was needed due to the nature of the flow of natural energy in the place. He was looking forward to the chance to have that competition with Selina Kyle since she was good and a test of skill was something he did look forward to. Of course Kurama had other ideas at the time, and he could not help but shake his head at some of the suggestions his demonic resident and still slightly reluctant partner had towards the woman. It would have been a lie though he did not find those same suggestions very interesting, and he had to keep those from conjuring perverted ideas into his head. But for now, he was going to indulge them at a later date since he had to go and see if he could find out what was going on in the city. He soon got up and fired a chakra chain to move to the next building below, and as soon as he swung away, he headed from building to building. That was when he spotted someone, or rather 3 people, moving over the rooftops. That piqued Naruto's interest as he began to move in the shadows while making sure to keep the 3 on sight. He moved close enough to finally see them and he grinned. Well now, if it isn't the Batman himself, certainly looks the part and the name, and that must be his accomplices. He moved ever closer to see both Robin and Batgirl. He had read the data that he could find and knew that both Robin and Batgirl were accomplished fighters and were part of the team. Though there was another named Nightwing. He had not seen that guy as of yet, but decided to shelve that thought aside for now as he kept watch on the 3. All the while making sure to be silent and still, not an easy thing for him considering his personality. But he had learned enough to get by. So far Batman did not react, and when he used his Senjutsu senses, he could tell that they had not found him yet. Once they were clear, the blonde shinobi followed them. They reached a warehouse which appeared to be occupied. He wagered a guess that the people who were there were not the law-abiding kind. And as he moved The shadows behind Batman and his group, he was able to see them in action. He saw how Batman fought, and the taijutsu stance that the man was using was more than enough to tell him that Batman was well trained. The way the guy moved spoke of intense training and discipline as well as years of experience. He did not try to just power through a foe. He was intelligent, patient, cunning, and also agile despite the build the guy had. Naruto nodded in approval as Batman continued to fight several of the crooks attacking him as he switched his attention to the others. Robin appeared to be less disciplined yet was unpredictable in his attack style, so that told Naruto that the young man had some street fighting background to him, though tempered no doubt by his boss's training methods and tactics. But Naruto did notice that the guy was a bit too overzealous and a bit too forceful as well in his attacks. The guy could recover well enough, but that action still left him vulnerable to see. Counter-attack as one of the thugs managed to get close enough to grab him in a bear hug from behind. Robin managed to free himself and knock the guy down, but Naruto could tell that he was still going to be needing improvement. As for Batgirl, Naruto had to give her credit for the look as well as her fighting skills. Apparently she had been trained well in taijutsu and no doubt had prior training in self-defense before being the costumed fighter that she was. And considering the way the various criminal elements that called this city home, he was hardly surprised by the fact that she had to defend herself on a regular basis. He watched them fight the thugs and he could tell that they were more than experienced in fighting side by side and alone, though he could guess that Batman was the more seasoned of the whole group, being the senior. In this case, Batman was like a Jonin and the two were either Genin or Chunin had they been born in his world. It was there and then that he sensed something was about to happen, and he decided that now was the time to go in and make a move of his own. Ellipsis. Barbara was not going to like this as she managed to knock down the thug while fighting along G-side Batman and Robin, who were also dealing with their own foes. The smuggling ring they had busted up happened to be well armed, and while some of them had been taken out by her and the others, the rest were putting up a heck of a fight. Unknown to her, however, one of the thugs had snuck up to a crane that was carrying a number of crates and then cut at the net with a knife. Robin spotted him and quickly tossed one of his Robin-themed boomerangs at the man. It was enough to knock the guy out, but the now weakened net tore up and down came the crates. Batman saw that too and shouted to Barbara, "Batgirl, move." Barbara looked up and her eyes widened at the sight as she saw the crates coming down. She tried to move, but the shock had temporarily stopped her from reaching for her grappling gun or to move away. However, she was not going to be lost under the crates or killed, as a certain someone made his very own move to help her from her predicament. The last thing she saw was large amount of smoke, and then she was being held bridal style in someone's arms. She looked to see herself looking at a face covered by a mask that had a fox-like appearance and a metal plate on the forehead. The area with a strange leaf-like symbol in the metal. Barbara was quite shocked by this and heard the massive crash. Turned into her surprise, she was at least 3 stories up where the crates could have crushed her into nothing but pulp. She looked back at the figure and managed to find her voice and spoke. Thanks. No problem, miss, hold on." That was her only warning as the guy leapt from the beams and began to move down. And as soon as they landed, another thug charged, but the new arrival quickly reacted by leaping forward with her still in his arms, and smashed a kick into the face, sending the guy down and placing her to the floor. He then turned and to her surprise took out what appeared to be ninja throwing stars and tossed them at the next attacker, who was armed with a pipe. That managed to stop him and pin him to the wall. Another attacker came and she turned to fight back, only for the masked being to move and block the incoming crowbar with what appeared to be sort of diamond-shaped metallic knife. She then saw it actually shimmer a bit and the crowbar was suddenly cut as her rescuer then unleashed a powerful side kick that sent the man flying to the side and right into a number of crates, showing that this fellow with the fox mask was a lot stronger than he actually looked. All of that was in a span of a few seconds as well, and it was not long before the smuggler thugs were down and out. It was here that Batman was accompanied by Robin and was now before the masked ninja. Barbara was soon moving to the side and was with Batman and Robin. Naruto could already see that he was now being assessed by Batman. This guy was very good, and after what he had seen, he could easily tell that Batman had been trained extensively in taijutsu and ninjutsu. Though he doubted that this world's version ninjas had the same level of ability as the ninjas of his world. He also had no doubt that Batman was going to come in hard on him and try to get some He answers out of him when he saw a chance. And he was right as Batman spoke. You're the Hokage. Naruto tried to lighten the mood, though he had a feeling that the guy in black was not going to rise to the bait, as it were. Good guess, Batman. Shame I can't give you a reward for the guess. You willing to take an IOU? Robin and Batgirl were surprised by the way the guy was talking to Bruce. It was as if he was not bothered by the fact that Bruce was giving him the third degree. Bruce himself was not amused and sternly glared at the man before him. Still, he noted that despite the attitude, the Hokage was also watching him intently. The body language did not give anything away, and that alone was telling to him, as the only way someone could do that was when the person was very well trained and experienced. Whoever this Hokage was, there was no doubt in Bruce's mind that he was someone who merely dressed up as a ninja. And the way he used the ninja stars and that knife told Bruce that this guy was a veteran fighter with some serious strength and stamina. But right now, he was in the mood to get some answers. What are you doing here in Gotham? Just passing through. I ain't here to steal your thunder or that of your running partners. I was just cruising along the area when I saw what was going down, and decided to observe the whole thing. Only decided to get involved with whole thing when your lady partner was about to be turned into a mess on the floor. That got Bruce's attention, as that meant that the whole time he, Barbara, and Tim were fighting, this guy had been watching them. He had trained himself to have a very high level of situational awareness, and his years of training and experience only made it stronger. To know that this guy had been here the old time and had not gotten his attention was enough to tell him that this guy was very well trained and possibly experienced to a level that was above normal. Whoever trained him was good. But still does not mean that I am going to let him go scot-free. Closing parenthesis. Really? I saw the news when you showed up in and then in Metropolis, and I can tell that you are no ordinary person. Naruto decided to try an experiment and spoke seriously in Japanese. He had a feeling that if Batman had been trained by a ninja master, then knowing the language was going to be second nature to him. You have no idea how different I am, Batman. But I can bet that as you were trained by a ninja master, you already guessed that, didn't you? And sure enough, Batman did not disappoint Naruto as he responded in Japanese. It didn't. The way you fought and moved tell me you are no mere kid. You were trained not by some simple martial artist, but a top-ranked assassin, and no doubt you had other teachers as well. You also showed that you have strong combat experience and reflexes. Only way you could earn that level of skill is not just through training alone, but by being placed in situations that demanded skill and innovation. And because of that, I can bet that you have been doing those things for years until you can do it without conscious thought. Closing parenthesis. Naruto grinned at that and replied, "Good, why? Or is every bit as skilled as I read in the news, Batman, and I can tell that you trained your two companions personally, though I can bet that they still have a long way to go to reach your level. Your master was no doubt a very good man and someone you respected a great deal and was a good influence to you. Now the question in my mind is what you are going to do now with me." Closing parenthesis. It should be obvious that I have to make sure that you are not a threat in disguise. I don't trust you one bit, Hokage. Closing parenthesis. You really need to loosen up, Yano. Considering what you know about me already, do you really think that I am going to go with you quietly? I ain't got any issue with you, but if you want to try and stop me, you're welcome to try. Closing parenthesis. Barbara and Tim looked at the two in utter annoyance and confusion, since none of them had taken a Japanese language course for different reasons, and thus they were not able to understand the conversation. But it was obvious to the two that both the Hawkeye and Batman were studying each other very carefully, no doubt waiting for them to make one move that could change the whole situation in a heartbeat. That was when Barbara spoke. "Hey, not to butt in or anything, but how is it you got to me so fast and get me away from the crates?" Naruto grinned and moved over to the crates and moved some away, showing some of his strength, and to the surprise of the heroes. Where Barbara was before, was a battered and cracked log. The blonde then replied to the question of the redhead, as he knew that she was in need of an explanation. "I used a special jutsu to get you out of the way. It was a basic move that is basically taught to all ninja, and quite possibly familiar to your tall, dark, and brooding boss over there. I switched this log for you, nd got you out of the way, and you were there in my arms. I would have to be a seriously stupid dolt to let a very strong and nice-looking lady being reduced into a pancake. Barbara could not help but raise an eyebrow as she could sense that the guy was flirting with her, and that was a bit surprising as the only one who did that was Dick. The former Robin, now Nightwing, was currently setting up shop outside of Gotham, and while they were still on very good terms with one another, it was a bit of a strain between their relationship that they were apart. Okay, so what do you do with you? Well, way I see it, you three can either let me go since we're pretty much on the same side, or you both can do things your boss's way since he plans to take me away for questioning since he apparently has major trust issues towards the new people. Tim and Barbara looked at Bruce and he nodded. We can't be too sure about his intentions or who he is. Barbara and Tim knew that Bruce did have a point, and looked to face Naruto, who was already working on how to get away before the situation went down south. The two looked at him and Batman was already getting ready on the off chance that Naruto did something. Naruto did something all right, but not in the way that the three expected, as he moved at amazing speed and yanked out his swords and jammed them into the ground. As he did so, he channeled his wind chakra and shouted out, "Fuuton! Razan K's!" The attack unleashed a sphere of pure wind that catches the three off guard as they were suddenly blasted by wind forces that were Category 3 in strength. That forced them back a fair distance to the point they had to use their grappling ropes to hold on the supports. The dust and debris blinded them as Naruto finally spoke. "Sorry about that, but there's no freaking way that I am going to let myself get caught by anyone just yet. Bye." Naruto then aimed upward as he placed his swords away. The three only saw a glowing chain suddenly lash up, and soon the man left the area as the wind died down. As soon as things seemed to calm down a bit more, they got away from where they all had anchored themselves and soon moved to find any trace of the Hokage. But they were not able to find any trace of the man now. Batman wiped his eyes a bit and looked at the place where Naruto had been and knew that they were going to be in for a very interesting time. It was here that the police came in, and that was the signal for him, Tim, and Barbara to move out of the area and get away from the regular police. They soon met with Commissioner Gordon, who was surprised to find out that someone else had come in on the scene, and from Batman's description and that of Robin and Batgirl, he was quick to guess just who it was. "The Hokage is here." "Yes, but we lost sight of him, so I believe it would be best we be watchful then. He's not exactly the kind of person who one can ignore without good reason." Batman talked with Gordon more and soon they were off to the Batcave, as he had a lot to talk about with the two. The way that Hokage fought was more than convincing to Batman that he was no simple kid and was possibly a lot older than he looked. His memories of his encounters with Talia's father Raz Aegel told him that if there is something odd about someone, it usually was not too good. Once they got there, Tim took off his mask and spoke in a serious tone, though with some annoyance, as he rubbed his back from the sudden attack of wind. "Man, what the heck was that he used on us? I felt like I got caught in a twister all of a sudden." Barbara nodded in agreement as she spoke next. "Same here. Could he have some sort of alien, like Kara and Clark, or is he a meta-human with wind manipulation powers?" Bruce took off his cowl and shook his head a bit. "No. As far as records show, most if not all meta-humans don't have to do those things like jamming swords into the ground. I doubt that move was for show. And if he was a meta-human, then he would have to be very well trained at that. Government trained and sanctioned maybe." Bruce shook his head at Tim's suggestion, as despite the way things looked, the government would not allow that. Plus the fact that the man spoke Japanese with some strange accent told him that the US government was not part of it. Plus everything about the Hokage screamed ninja training thou. The choice of orange in his ensemble as well as red made Bruce even more curious. "I doubt it, the government does not have a hand in this. Besides that, the weapons he carried were well made, with these being different. They don't sell this in novelty stores after all. These look better made and possibly handcrafted as well as sharpened." Bruce referred to the shuriken they recovered earlier, as he took them for the dusting of prints. He needed to know if this guy was recorded in the national and international database, and soon. But he was surprised to find that there were no fingerprints, meaning that he was not going to get anywhere in that avenue. After some time in figuring out his plans on how to deal with the Hokage, he spent some time putting Barbara and Tim through some simulations, much to their chagrin. Thankfully it was not too long as he gave them the chance to unwind and get some much-needed sleep, Tim was quick to head up and chat with Alfred and get some food and drink before getting some shut-eye. While Barbara did the same before she would head home. After all, she did have a life outside of being Batgirl. Bruce checked the news and saw that as clockwork. Word of the Hokage's arrival was released to the public of Gotham, and the rest of the world. There was no doubt in his mind that Clark was going to soon pay him a visit. After all, he had encounter Ed the Hokage already, so some input from the Kryptonian was a must if they were going to solve the mystery on who the Hokage was and what were his plans and intentions. Ellipsis. As for Naruto, he was current. Getting himself ready for the chance to finally cross paths with Selena and possibly have some fun while he was here. He made sure, however, to get as much shut-eye as he could and also update his work, as he had gotten an email from his editor that there were increasing demands for more of his work. Once that was out of the way, after several hours, the blonde decided to go and grab some much-needed shut-eye for what was to come to him. Ellipsis. In Wayne Manor the next day. Bruce was currently awake and doing the usual routine of running the company and making the calls. It was here that he was waiting for someone to show up. Someone he had called to come to Gotham for a very important purpose. And it was not long before Alfred appeared and spoke to the billionaire. "Master Bruce, Mr. Clark Kent has arrived." Bruce nodded as Clark appeared, as the Kryptonian then spoke to the butler. "Thanks, Alfred. Think nothing of it, Mr. Kent. Would you like some tea and breakfast? You must be tired from the trip." Clark smiled at the butler as he respected Alfred. After all, even though he did not pry into Bruce's life, he could easily tell that Alfred was more than an employed manservant. He laced that aside for the time being as he spoke to Alfred. Sure, some tea and simple crackers would be nice. Of course. As Alfred left the room, both heroes spoke to one another, with Clark speaking first to Bruce. "I heard that the Hokage was here and I was able to tell Perry about it, so he sent me here to try and get some news on him." "That's the official reason, I take it?" "Yeah, the real reason is that he knows who I am, Bruce." That got the attention of the billionaire crime fighter, as he knew that Clark was very capable of hiding his identity for years since he came to Metropolis. No one who he did not trust and were close to him knew of his dual identity as Superman. But now this unknown hero who had some very strange abilities had actually found Clark out. That was a surprising thought, and as much as he did not want to admit it, Bruce was a bit worried. If the Hokage figured that Clark was Superman, there was a chance that he might figure out that he and Batman were one and the same. How exactly did that happen? I have no idea. All I know is that he was able to find out about me only hours after we met. I get the feeling he must have been tracking me for a while, though. He did it without alerting me is shocking. Bruce thought over what he had experienced with the Hokage personally and replied. Not as shocking as you might think. Me, Tim, and Barbara encountered him last night. And I can tell that despite his teenage form, he's a lot more skilled than he looks. The fact was that he had been observing us the whole time we were dealing with a smuggling ring, and the only time we found him was when he chose to reveal himself. That tells me that whoever trained him was a top-notch assassin, since there's no denying that his skills are like that of a ninja. Possibly he must also have a very high level of control over his body to have been able to avoid your senses, and he possibly had other trainers as well. Both men thought things over as Clark spoke. What else did you find out? Bruce took out one of the recovered shuriken and replied. We recovered this weapon of his from the warehouse when he managed to evade us before I could tag him. This is a traditional ninja shuriken, and it's very well made, good quality steel and specially sharpened for balance and flight, along with cutting power. This tells me that he did not buy this in some novelty store. He possibly had this custom made, or forged and sharpened this himself. This shuriken is quality work, similar to the same shuriken used by an old foe of mine, so there's no doubt he was very well trained. Clark took the weapon and could see that Bruce was right. He might not know ninjas all that well, but there was no denying that the weapons was very well made. Bruce then spoke to Clark as he recalled that strange but unique ability the man possessed. He also had the ability to manipulate wind to a degree. We were about to capture him when he used some form of weather manipulation to send me and the others back from him. He's a meta-human. That's possible, but we'll leave that for now. If you plan to find out what you can of him, this is the best time for it. If what he did in Metropolis is any indication, he will not be here for long in Gotham. Clark nodded as he decided to take his time and find a chance to finally speak to the blonde Hokage and figure out just how he had found him out. He had no plans to fight the young man since technically he was not an enemy, but he doubted that Bruce was going to make things that simple or straightforward. Ellipsis. The next night, Naruto was busy tracking down some band of crooks just to see how far they were going to go, and he was not the least bit tired yet. He noted something odd about these guys, and that was that while they were acting like regular robbers, what they stole was certainly not regular stuff. A large amount of chemicals and plants, if one can believe that, which was enough to tell him that these guys were not your regular thieves. He had spent the morning working on his novel series and also his manga, and that took most of the morning and afternoon, but as night fell, he decided to go outside and say what was there to do and who he was going to meet. As he watched the thieves move about, he was quite surprised to find them moving into the sewers, and he growled at that. Great, this is one of the times I wished I did not have a nose. Closing parenthesis. That's nothing compared to the view I have to content with in that old sewer you called your mind. At least you took a different approach even if I am still in the cage. Closing parenthesis. We're partners, remember Kurama. Now we're going in, who knows, this might get interesting. Closing parenthesis. Right. Naruto followed the thieves, and as he did so, he also made sure to be thankful that his mask managed to at least guard him from some of the smell. How the people could tolerate these things he would never know, but he was not going to waste time arguing as he began to think himself on what was it these guys were only robbing plants and chemicals. He got his answer as he suddenly spotted them going out of the sewers to go into another one where a massive factory was. And he could see that the factory in question was releasing a fairly bad amount of chemicals into the nearby water. He shook his head and moved after the thieves carefully and once more entered the sewers. Much to his disgust, and soon he found them, only to find them down on the ground and dead, and he saw the marks on their lips that was the sign of poison. That made him raise his eyebrows, and he used his senjutsu again to sense the energy around him, even though it was not easy. He felt a chakra signature and sensed one that felt like a fusion of some sort, similar to him when he tapped into nature energy, though there was a plant-like feel to it as well. That was more than enough to tell him that he was dealing with Poison Ivy this time around. He sighed mentally and headed off to track her down and stop her. He had no idea who owned this place, but considering what he had seen thus far, it was clear to him just what Ivy had in mind for the people who worked in the factory. He, however, could not help but mentally whistle at the sight of the woman, as images of the woman did not do her justice. One thing was sure, the femme fatale tag that was given to her was well deserved. Especially considering her ability to kill with a touch or kiss when she wanted to do so. He got closer and also could see that she was carrying a container of sorts, enough to make him guess that he was soon going to make her move on her foes, and now he was going to make his move. What the heck are you doing here? Oh, this is new. I was expecting Batman and his little posse to deal with me this time around. But I had been keeping myself under the radar the whole time. Now it seems that I have a new visitor. The woman turned and saw the Hokage, and Naruto had to raise his eyebrow a bit behind his mask as the woman spoke once more. You are certainly not Batman, nor Robin, nor Nightwing as the older one calls himself now. And before you say anything, I know who you are, Hokage. Have you now? Well, you can bet that I am not going to let you do what you like. Poison Ivy smirked and replied. I guessed that, but apparently you are not very familiar with who I am or what I can do. Now let's see how you deal with my babies. Naruto knew what that meant as he did read her profile, but decided to play the naive guy first, as he had an idea on playing some tricks on the woman. That as why he allowed himself to be restrained by the vines that came out of the ground nearby. Poison Ivy smiled a bit as she walked over to the restrained Hokage and enjoyed the chance to finally have someone else in her clutches for a change of pace. She was expecting Batman to try and stop her from using her special seeds to attack the water supply of a factory that was poisoning the waters near a plot of land that she felt would be a great site for some wild plants that were very rare in her mind. But instead of the Dark Knight, it was this guy who apparently was not all that familiar with her powers and abilities. Such a shame. The Hokage tried to free himself from her vines as she decided to end him once and for all. She reached for his face, and with him being affected by her neural toxin, she was able to remove his mask. The man was rather handsome, young-looking, and she had to admit that the whisker marks on his face made him have a feral look. The guy looked at her with deep blue eyes that also seemed to have a strange but attractive quality in them, so she had to admit that killing someone like him was a waste, but she was not going to be dissuaded in her mission by anyone. The guy struggled and she held him by the face and spoke seductively. "You should not struggle so much, take heart in the fact that your last kiss in this life is coming from me, and for you, I will make your death slow." The young man glared and she kissed him and allowed her poison to flow into him. She felt his struggles begin to slacken, and when she moved back, the guy looked at her and shish. He saw his eyes glow in defiance and soon faded away as his head dropped to his chest. She sighed and spoke to herself. "Shame you had to die handsome, but I have my mission, you can release him, my darlings." The vines did what she asked and she walked off to do her work, but she was about to discover something about her foe that was totally unexpected. She then heard his voice again, and that stopped her right in her tracks in utter shock. "Not a bad kiss, Ivy-chan, but I think that you are using too simple a kissing technique. Have you considered trying a French kiss instead of just pressing your lips? That might work a lot better than you think." Pamela turned around and was shocked to see the man she had kissed and see drop dead was now standing up there before her, alive and grinning eye in a very amused fashion as he moved closer to her. She thought of using her crossbow, but before she could do that, there was a loud screech of metal and she looked at her weapon and found out that the triggering mechanism was destroyed by a large metallic needle. She tried to use her fist, but when she tried to slug him, he moved very fast and literally faded from view. "What the? Not even Batman is that fast." "Nice try, Ivy-chan, but you need to move faster than that. I only allowed your plants to catch me to have an idea of your skills, and while you get an A for the seduction bit, you failed in some others as well." She turned and tried to spot her foe and shouted, "How can you be alive? My kiss can kill any man. Well, as you have found out, I am no ordinary man, and if you think I am pulling your chain, why don't I kiss you for a change?" That surprised the female supervillain, as no one was crazy enough to try kissing her of their own free will. But somehow this guy was immune to her kiss, which was impossible as she was the only one able to make the antidote for all the poisons she unleashed with her lips. She turned and there was the man before her, grinning once more, and before she could react, he kissed her and he was not dropping dead at all. His kiss was light and yet it seemed to be strong and masculine, and that had a very interesting effect on her as he pressed his lips a bit more on her own, and he still was not dropping dead at all. She even felt him lick her lips as well with his tongue. He then replied in a very teasing tone as if he could sense that he had somehow knocked her senseless. "Come on, Ivy-chan, put some more power in the kiss. You're not getting flustered by the fact that I am a man who's immune to your kiss of death, are you?" She pushed him away and he laughed gently and spoke in a teasing tone. "You are getting flustered. You're blushing so hard your face is like a rose, like your hair. That adds to the beauty you've already got, you know. Care to try again, Ivy-chan? I promise I'll show you how to kiss better if you let me." Ivy did not wait to try and figure things out as she shouted as her plants began to react to her emotions. "No, I will not accept this. Stop him, my darlings." The plants moved at their mistress's commands and Naruto managed to avoid them, and this time around he was not going to let Ivy's pets get to him. He quickly took out one of his swords and began to cut down the vines that were trying to get to him. He saw that Ivy was looking at him in utter horror and confusion. The first emotion was no doubt since he was killing her plant pets. And the second emotion was there due to the fact that he was still alive. Truth be told, the reason, or rather reasons, that he was still alive was his more than ample vitality, bloodline, senjutsu training, and the chakra given to him by Kurama. But he was not going to reveal that for any reason, as he was enjoying the situation a little too much. Poison Ivy was still sending the vines at him and he cut them down until he decided to make a move as he suddenly faded from the view of Ivy. She backed away, only to bump into him as she turned around to backhand him. Naruto ducked the attack and was soon before Ivy and he quickly kissed her again. Once more Ivy was shocked to see that he was not dropping dead or screaming in pain from the toxins she normally would have unleashed via contact, and it was becoming difficult for her to react. Naruto then spoke to her huskily into her ear as he broke the contact with her lips. "You know, I can respect the whole idea of protecting nature and all that, but I am still going to stop you since what you are going to is going to kill people. You think killing them is going to be the answer. Ivy looked at Naruto darkly as she replied. They are harming the environment. Killing nature. You think that you can do better than what I am doing. You'll be surprised what being less violent can bring you, Ivy-chan. I know all there is about you and what you used to do and who you used to be. You're taking this love for nature a little too far, don't you think? Ivy snorted and tried to launch another series of kicks at Naruto, who could see that despite her experience, she had not ever faced anyone who could fight her without being hampered by her poisons. All the while, she spoke to him and she was frowning a great deal, as she was no doubt getting annoyed by the fact that she was not yet able to hit him. What do you care? No doubt you think you can exploit nature just like them. They ignore the fact that this world is fragile and they can do what they like. I am the only one who can protect nature. She deserves to be protected. And you think killing is going to do that? Especially when you consider the fact that what you will do can kill people who are not part of your plans. You think that your attack will only target the ones you want in this factory. What happens when innocent people are poisoned? Ned, in the long run, are killed by what you intend to do. The factory workers there have no idea about what their company is doing, and they are only working there to earn money to pay for their bills, pay their taxes, feed house and clothe their families. Do they deserve to die just for doing what they can to take care of their families and give a future for them? Naruto stopped attacking Ivy at his point as she looked back at him as he spoke seriously. You may target those who you feel commit crimes towards nature, but have you ever considered the fact that you could also be attacking people who either do not know it or were just trying to go about with their lives and had no idea about it? I know about the accident that gave you your powers, but I can bet that there was a cost to it as well. If there is something I learned in my life, there's always a cost to having power. You don't know what you are talking about. Leave me alone. I know that your accident denied you ever being able to have kids, and I know that the idea of never being able to have children is a fate most if not all women think is worse than death. Because losing the ability to have children takes away the ability to bring new life into the world, which is why women are the ones who are able to have children, and it's never the men who can do that. That's why you care deeply for nature, you care for plants. Because they are the only things you can nurture and grow yourself. They're taking the place of those who you could have called your family, aren't they? You protect nature because you want to be able to feel like a mother when you can never be one yourself. Ivy glared at him and then lashed out with the plants once more. Naruto, however, evaded them and he replied. I struck a nerve, didn't I, Ivy-chan? Shut up. You don't know anything about me. Naruto moved and grabbed her fist and replied. I might not know you, but I do know how important nature is. If you want me to prove my point, then let me show you. Ivy did not understand why, but he was serious and she replied. If you're lying to me, I'll make you regret it, even if you are indeed immune to my poisons. Naruto nodded and then spotted a dying plant in a pot. No doubt left behind, and was already nothing more than a shriveled little thing in poor soil. It was the perfect test subject for his little demonstration, and he took it before him as he sat down cross-legged. Ivy watched as Naruto focused into himself and accessed the growing reserve of purified chakra he got from Kurama. The energy was still very potent, and Kurama was willing to part with portions of it once in a while, and his hands were coated in deep blue chakra energy. What the? Ivy was surprised as she suddenly saw the glowing energy coming from the Hokage's hands, and it seemed to make the air feel alive for some reason. She felt her body somehow react to the energy in a rather pleasant way, and she looked to see that her plants seemed to be calmed by the energy. But what really got her attention was the plant that Naruto had found as Naruto placed his hands with the energy on either side of the plant. The once dead and decaying thing actually began to grow again. The eco-terrorist watched in shock as the plant began to gain new life. The bark became healthy again, the branches grew longer and stronger, leaves sprouted out, and beautiful violets came from the plant. In a few moments, what was once a dead and gone plant that made her furious at humans who cared little for life was brought back to life by this man. Naruto grinned a bit as he took the plant and channeled some more yang chakra into the soil to make it more healthy. He then got up and moved to a stunned Ivy and gave her the blooming plant as he spoke next to her. Here you go, Ivy-chan. I think this plant will do well under your care. Ivy touched the plant, trying to see if the whole thing was some illusion and she was being tricked, but there was no trick at all. She could sense that the plant before her was truly healthy and blooming. The soil that was in the pot also felt different. The soil seemed to be alive and tingled with energy and could be strong enough to sustain the plant for months despite the fact that it should be already barren. She studied the plant again and again, and seeing that the plant was indeed real, she looked at Naruto and spoke. "How did you do this?" Naruto grinned and replied, "Now that would be telling Ivy-chan. After all, even a man has got to have some secrets, right? What I can say is that the energy I have is unique to me, and when I use it, I can affect life and nature itself in a positive way. Care to feel it as well, Ivy-chan?" Naruto gently placed his hand on Ivy's cheek, and to the redhead's surprise, the energy that he felt from the Hokage's hand seemed to make her feel a level of warmth and sensation that felt very pleasant, almost to the point that she actually moaned. She realized that in a moment and looked at Naruto, who grinned a bit more and even gave her a very knowing smirk. "You like that, don't you, Ivy-chan?" Ivy looked at him and spoke seriously. "How are you able to do all of that? Are you a meta-human?" "No, though I have no clue what meta-human means just yet, but as you can guess, I'm not your average human. You know, if you want to make a contribution to nature, you make sure to get people on your side for once instead of scaring the living daylights out of them or killing them. I mean seriously, Ivy-chan, you have a lot of power already, but you can't expect people to change their ways right off the bat. The more you fight like a terrorist, the more likely you make enemies. Try having some allies on your side for a bit, see how it goes, since the more allies and less enemies you have, the better off you might be in the long run. You expect me to side with the people who are taking nature for granted. Not all people take nature for granted, you know. Some of them know that if nature gets ruined, then where will they go from here? There are people who care about nature as much as you do, and despite that they are not always listened to, they do get things done. Just try to defeat your foes without killing them. I kill my foes too, of course, but only when I have to protect my precious people or to keep innocent people from being hurt. Besides, if you have the law on your side and not on their side, wouldn't it be a lot easier for you to do what you want and defend nature, since at least you don't have to worry about Batman and the cops as well as the government? Ivy, though, UGHT it over and had to admit that the Hokage did have a point there. It was at times easier if the law was on one side and not digging its talons into the sides of said person. And while she was a radical, there were others like her. Like those men and women willing to give the Japanese fishermen a serious headache when they go for harpooning whales. She did not really have a deep liking for whales. But she understood the reasons behind their actions, and she could respect their willingness to risk being labeled as pirates. And while they had to follow the laws when they carried a flag of another nation on their missions, those same laws prevented them from being prosecuted on sight by their foes, since they did not want to cause an international incident. However, that still left the blonde before her as she spoke towards him. "And what about you, Hokage? What exactly are you going to do with me?" Naruto replied with a smirk. "Obviously I am only going to stop you from killing people, even if they are guilty of what you feel are crimes against nature. If you try to fight them without killing them unless you have to, that might not bother me too much. But when you harm innocent people in your vendetta intentionally, that when the kid gloves are off, Ivy-chan. And truth be told, compared to the others I have dealt with, you are going to be in serious trouble with them than just me. I pretty much leave you to your own devices unless you cross the line. I might like nature, but I am not going to kill people intentionally for it, since you forget that people are part of Nature's plans too, even if humans are the dangerous ones. There are humans who can save nature too, just like you, though not to that level. I'm not exactly human anymore, you do know that, right? Yeah, but you have the heart of a human. You can be a force of nature for sure. Heck, by all rights you could be ranked as a nature goddess with those powers of yours, but you have a human mind, body, heart and senses. And humans know when to punish and when to nurture. You might have gotten these powers at an accident, but you can use them to protect and heal just as much as you can harm and kill. If you can become more than you are and have allies on your side, I have a feeling your mission will be less difficult. Plus you can recover what it means to care for all life, not just plants." Naruto grinned a bit more perversely as he replied. "Besides that, I can help you in another fashion." Ivy raised her eyebrow as he moved forward and whispered into her ear. "I can let you experience what it means to be a beautiful woman who is attractive to a man, Ivy-chan. And that means in a very physical fashion if you feel so inclined. That got Ivy to blush bright red to the point her face was L. Ika rose and she looked at him in shock as he smiled even more. Did I get you hot and bothered by any chance, Ivy-chan? Please say yes. You can't possibly be serious. Naruto grinned and replied as he moved to Ivy once more, and she did not react negatively as he traced her lips with his finger. Oh, but I am Ivy-chan. After all, I am quite possibly the only man at this point who is immune to your toxins and poisons, as well as your pheromones. But I doubt you need the last power to get my attention on you, and there's the fact that I am not an enemy of yours unless you make me into one. I also have the power to nurture nature as well as caring for it as you do, though in a more moderate fashion. Plus, my skills can help you gather all the evidence you need to nail enemies to the wall. And there's the fact that I have a lot of experience when it comes to making women very happy as well. You might not be able to have a chance to be a mother in the human way, but that hardly means you can't be a woman in the human way either. Naruto stopped to let that all sink into Ivy's head, and he replied as he could see that she had taken it all in. Now then, if you plan to go ahead with your previous intent, I am going to fight seriously, and you can bet Ivy-chan that this might not end well for you since you can't defeat me with poisons and toxins, and as you have seen, I am not in the same league as Batman. Or you can call this off and take what I suggested into consideration, and if you need convincing, then I am more than willing to do just that. Later, as Naruto got out of the sewers, he swore that he was going to clean up and shower after all that. He had smelled pretty horrid things before, but a Gotham sewer was one experience he had no intention of repeating. But at least he managed to stop Ivy from her plans and hopefully made her change her ways. He doubted that one night was going to cut it, but there was no sense in trying it outright. Besides, he was not joking about letting Ivy have some male company for once in her life. After all, he was not an enemy of hers unless she did something that could harm innocent people. He respected nature in a fashion that was similar to her. And he was naturally immune to her poisons and toxins, so dying from her touch or kiss would not happen anytime soon. Besides, he would have to admit that the idea of being intimate with someone that good-looking and dangerous had a very nice charm to it. That was something that Kurama commented on. You certainly stepped into it now, brat. I can't believe you actual L. Why want that to happen between the two of you? Closing parenthesis. I gave my word after all, Kurama, and you know me, I back my words with action. Closing parenthesis. HMPH. I know that, Kit, that's the reason you and I have managed to work together well for the past many years, and the reason I learned to respect and even like you. Still, you have grown some serious balls, as you humans call it. You do know that if it was not for facts that your Uzumaki bloodline gives you the vitality and stamina, your senjutsu training which you have been working on like mad, and my ability to heal you of injury and sickness, her kiss could have killed you, right? I know, and I like it, and I can certainly enjoying showing her how to use those charms of her better. Closing parenthesis. Kurama laughed at that and replied, and you have the gall to call me a pervert. You're turning into a pervert who flirts with women who try to kill you. I personally find that to be a weird balance between brave and suicidal. Closing parenthesis. Naruto laughed at that and moved on while switching back to his senjutsu mode to scan the area around him, and he could not help but smirk in surprise when he felt a very familiar chakra signature, and then 3 familiar ones. Well, now, we have company. Batman, Robin, Batgirl, and Superman, they no doubt are trying to track us down, Kurama. Closing parenthesis. Figures they would be interested. You left the impression after all on them, so, any plans yet? Let them make a first move and we string them along, see how far they are willing to go to try and get us. Closing parenthesis. Don't you mean you? Keep in mind you have not exactly told them about M.E. and the fact that it makes you a Jinchuriki, remember? And I will not unless something convinces me to tell me otherwise. Besides, telling them I got a demon fox inside me ain't exactly common knowledge around here yet. Plus they'll either think I am joking or I deserve to be in the loony bin. And no way am I going to let myself get locked up with the nuts that call that place home. Closing parenthesis. Brew. CE looked through some special binoculars and spoke to both Tim and Barbara. Looks like our Hokage friend has gone away from the sewers. Tim raised an eyebrow at that and replied, what could he have been doing in there? Barbara shook her head and replied. Don't know, but that's where the thieves were supposed to have been seen going to last time I checked the reports. The fact they were acting like that must mean they were being controlled. Don't bother with that, I looked through the sewers, the crooks are there and they look poisoned. Batman decided to check the bodies out later. If what he had seen on the stolen list was accurate, then that meant Poison Ivy was on the move again. As much as he liked nature due to his time traveling and training, he did not like the extremes that Ivy did to protect it. He personally disliked it when she nearly killed his friend Harvey Dent before he turned into Two-Face, nor when she nearly turned Alfred into a plant-human hybrid. He then had an idea as he took out one of his tracers and gave it to Superman and spoke. How good were you in baseball? Superman looked a bit confused for a moment and then nodded in agreement as he was quickly able to grasp just what was it that Bruce had in mind. He pitched his arm up and managed to weigh in how much strength he needed for the distance and how to avoid injuring the man as well as Alohan. The tracer to latch onto him without becoming a bullet. Not too hard for him to do when one considered the fact that Clark had a very advanced brain and the power to use said brain as well. He too SSED it and soon the TRCER sailed through the air, propelled by the Kryptonian strength, and he saw it with his micro-vision as it managed to land on the coat of the Hokage. Just as the man took off and he replied to Bruce. Got him. That was the cue for the rest of them to go after the Hokage as the man was now on the move, perhaps they could finally get the answers they were in need of. Ellipsis. Later. The four of them managed to track down the Hokage to a hotel, and as soon as they were there, Bruce nodded that now was the time to go in and find the man. But once they got there, he was out, no doubt going to grab a meal of some sort as it was the right time for dinner. This allowed them to look the place over. Bruce entered the hotel room that was owned by the Hokage and wondered just at the status was of this masked hero when it came to financing. The apartment might not be high class, but to be able to be here in a well-known hotel in good comfort suggested that the guy was well funded and therefore was not to be taken lightly. He was also curious about the way his weapons were made, as the recovered ninja stars were authentic and were not like the kind of things one found in a novelty store. He was not alone in this search as Robin, Batgirl, and Superman were there with Clark scanning the place. They all had taken a very strong interest on the man. Clark to find more of this man who had managed to find out his identity. Barbara was curious on what was the guy's story, and Robin wanted to see if this guy was as good as Bruce without him using those powers of his. Bruce looked at the room and suspected that the guy was hiding more than just his identity as he looked over the drawers, as he did not help but feel that something was going on. It was a feeling in his mind and gut. And if there was one thing his training had taught him, it was to trust at times the feelings in his gut. That was when they discovered the tracer on the coat of the Hokage, with a note in it. They took the note and read it. Hello there. I figured you would find this hotel room of mine sooner or later, Batman, and no doubt that your companions are with you, and I wagered. I guess old Big Blue Superman is with you too. You might be wondering how I know Superman is with you, right? Let's just say that someone with his more than unique energy signature is pretty darn hard to miss, especially for a guy like me. Couple that with his ability to see through things except lead, you would have found me already, only I knew you were coming, so I decided to scram in a very different fashion and leave something, and your team might be able to hear people coming a mile away, but I have learned some techniques that trump the training, and no, I am not going to tell, so don't bother asking. Anyhow, it was not unexpected you would find me, so I decided to make myself scarce. If there's one thing I learned in my more than interesting life that kept me from being buried in a coffin, is to always have a backup plan. And I recommend you forget trying to find the tailor of my coat just in case you think to find him and question who he made it for, because like that letter I gave Superman, that coat's about to go bye-bye. See ya, Hokage. That was the only warning that Batman and the others had as the jacket suddenly began to burn and soon was reduced into nothing but a pile of ash, along with the tracer. That was enough to tell Bruce and company that their chance to find him was long dead and gone, and with the room's fire alarm going off from the smoke coming from the ruined jacket, there was going to be too many people in the area for them to get a precise idea where the Hokage had gone. Clark had to shake his head and spoke to the others. How the heck did he find out that I was around? Bruce shook his head at that and replied. I am not very sure on how he did it, but it seems that we are going to have to leave before we're found out. Tim, can you come back here and find out just who rented the room? Already on it first thing tomorrow morning. I want to find out just who this guy really is. Clark had a feeling that it was not going to be that simple as he looked at the now reduced pile of destroyed cloth as they soon got out of the room before hotel security came into the room. Outside, Naruto grinned a bit as he was a very fair distance away from the hotel that he had left his coat in. It was sad that he had to lose that coat, but that was why he always carried spares in his scrolls. He then moved away from the place and was happy. Had he secretly planned an escape route out of the hotel in advance? After all, that was not his real base of operations and he was going to his real base right now. The blonde shinobi moved quickly over the buildings and resorted to using his kunai with the wires and soon arrived near an old steel mill that was left behind by the company that once owned it, and it was outside of the city limits. This was his real base of operations and he had made it as comfortable as he could in the metal there, while old was useful for making spare weapons. He had been friends with Tenten and she did teach him on how to make his own weapons and gear, so why the company left behind good quality metal was something he was confused with. And since this place was deemed off limits and no longer of any value, it was going to destroyed in a month from now, more than ample time for him to make the place his base while in Gotham. And when they demolished it, the city government was going to unwittingly erase any trace of him ever being there in the first place. Their lose and his gain he supposed, and as he went in, he decided to make sure that before the last week was over, he was going to make things very interesting before he left the city. The rest of next week for Naruto was downright entertaining as he had managed to avoid getting on the radar of Batman and company while tangling against Selina Kyle. The woman was certainly a lot better prepared than last time they met and she was more than willing to go all out to try and evade him when she finally robbed someone. The reason he was able to locate her was namely due to his senjutsu training and how to sense chakra. After sensing Selina's chakra energy signature and narrowing it down, he now was able to track her, but she was not going to make it the least bit easy. She apparently had been busy getting herself into tip-top shape and they were soon moving over the rooftops, and there was no doubt in his mind that they had to be careful since Batman might be around. The first day of the between them had her stealing a golden scepter with jewels from a businessman's private collection, and he was able to arrive before anyone arrived on site. And soon the chase was on. The distance to the place where he would not chase her was fairly long, so she was going to push it as much as she could. Naruto and Selina had a HEC of a race between them, and as they faced one another, the female thief was really giving Naruto a very interesting time as she did what she could to fight him off or evade him. But it was not long before he managed to switch her sachet bag with another one of the same make, which turned out to be filled with a cat plush toy this time. Selina found out about the switch when she checked the bag as he appeared right in front of her while hanging upside down on the roof of the building that she had tried to hide in. The woman knew that as per the agreement between them, she was going to reveal her face. Once she did so, Naruto whistled wolfishly and called her one very attractive woman, and he was impressed at how she managed to keep herself this good looking. He then returned the golden specter to the owner, though in this case, the man turned out to have been something of the fencer for some wild cats that was supposed to be off limits. That was more than enough to explain just why Selina targeted the man. Naruto had some entertainment at the end of it when he spotted none other than Bane, who was currently going in to fight Batman and his group, though the three had to deal with Bane's goons as the man was currently running a drug-running business. The man was certainly large, and despite the size, this guy certainly knew how to move and fight, and while Batman seemed to be a bit troubled, he was more than willing to go all out to fight the muscle-bound criminal. He did not interfere yet as he wanted to see just how Batman would do in this kind of the fight. And he was not the least disappointed as Batman finally proved to be as capable as before, despite the fact that at times, Bane tossed him around like a rag doll. Robin and Batgirl were there as well, and he could not help but nod in respect at the way the two fought alongside Batman, though his eyes were locked in on Batgirl as he wolf-whistled mentally at the way she moved. He was very interested in Yusen her as a new character in his novel series once he was out of the area before he was going to be found out. But not before seeing the team defeat Bane and allow the man to taken away by the police. And no doubt going back to that lovely place Arkham Asylum. Ellipsis. On the next day, Naruto decided to get to work writing on his newest novel, and he was more than willing to use what he had been doing or rather done so far with both Ivy and Selena. His very much accepted perverted nature already going into overdrive as he wrote the stories that involved Selena and Pamela as well as himself. Though H.E. usually changed the names and also made sure to make some alterations to make things a lot more interesting and avoid arousing the ire of said ladies. He was very interested to see just how the POPLE were going to react the very second these stories came out into circulation. And once he was done, he was off to finally continue the next phase of his competition with the gorgeous Selena Kyle as night fell. However, along the way he ran into one really oddball but still attractive woman who rode one really weird contraption if he ever saw one, and that was saying something since he had seen his fair share of crazy contraptions back home. The blonde spotted the woman known as Roxy Rocket, a daredevil stunt woman who had way too many close calls and was an adrenaline junkie to the extreme. The woman had managed to do a daring robbery and was cruising along the streets, scaring the living daylights out of people as he managed to keep out of sight and get dressed. The Gotham PD tried to chase her and stop her rampage, but it was also here that Naruto appeared. Roxy was a bit surprised at the appearance he made, namely since he was currently in his wind armor jutsu, but tried to play white chicken with him and even gave him a kiss and a dare to catch her. The blonde was not in the mood to play catch the woman, so he decided to put an end to this chase. He quickly fired a pair of Icon into the engine, and that slowed Roxy down, allowing him to get ahead of her and then intercept her with a quick mid-air grab as he then moved to fire one of his wire-armed kunai and then swing over to the nearby sign. He placed her down and then spoke to her about trying to get herself turned into a proverbial smear on the wall, which was the fate of her little ride as it was now burning on the wall. The woman, however, didn't seem to mind and even tried to come onto him. Apparently she got a rush facing him in aerial fighting and was even asking him if he had a girlfriend. Naruto didn't know whether to laugh or snort. Sure, Roxy was interesting and certainly a sight, but she was a bit odd in his mind. And that was saying something, since Naruto had a very long history of meeting people who were beyond borderline crazy. He decided to partially lie and say that he was seeing someone, to which Roxy asked if his girlfriend was as wild and interesting as she was. To which he replied she was. That did not make Roxy change her tune, however, as she replied that she was going to prove that she was a lot wilder. Naruto snorted a bit, and despite Roxy being charming, which was not too hard to do with the way she dressed, he finally managed to restrain her and leave, just as the cops came in. The woman reminded a bit too much of Anko, who actually flirted with him a number of times, even though he was technically married. Though unlike Roxy, Anko knew when not to push her luck and merely enjoyed the company. He also evaded the police and soon was out of sight. As night fell, Naruto managed to move out and evade the police patrols and soon used his senjutsu training. He soon found Selena and soon found her, stealing a golden cat mask from the Gotham Museum, and off she went, forcing him to follow. This time, however, he was not alone in the pursuit, though it was the GPD, and soon he and the police were closing in on Selena. The cops had a hard time in keeping up with Selena as he watched from the sidelines. But the blonde thief then managed to enter a series of abandoned apartments, and soon the police were forced to search the place building by building. That was more than good for Naruto, as he was in senjutsu mode and tracking Selena. The two of them met, and this time, instead of fighting him, Selena tried to take the seduction route, and boy was she unleashing the charm this time around. The two chased one another, and despite the decrepit conditions of the apartments, they were doing all right. At one point, the blonde thief actually decided to kiss I am a bit while rubbing her body on his body, more than enough to get him interested. She even ran his hands on his thighs, a first on his part. She even tried to place his hands on her breasts of all things. And he was not going to complain, as Selena was really hamming it up. Not to mention that she was even willing to use her tongue on him on a few instances, as she also tried to get away from him when she could while evading the police. That was more than enough to tell Naruto that she was really willing to do what she could in order to get away from him. He was not far behind in the said action game, as he was more than willing to give as good as he got. When she thought she had evaded him, he would appear and whisper into her ear from behind while gently smacking her well-shaped butt at the same time. That action he did made her cry out a bit at his willingness to do that and briefly glare at him before trying to reverse the whole thing. She would even try to use her whip at him. But he merely gave her smiles and playful cat calls. He even managed to catch her whip and then pull her to him, and he would catch her and shamelessly rub his face on her bust. That was more than enough to make Selena gasp at his actions, as this was something she had not expected. He even placed his thigh between her legs, making her raise an eyebrow at him for his actions. This went on for a while until Selena escaped after managing to tie him up and left, unaware of the fact that Naruto had managed to get into her sachet halfway through their little romp through the apartments and plaque. In a simple but very cute cat-themed mask which he had managed to buy from before. As she left, he freed himself and finally surprised Selena in the pier by revealing the switch, and she groaned a bit as she knew what that meant. Ellipsis. The next day, they were on their date, and it was rather interesting as Naruto decided to dress nice for the occasion. After all, this was a date and he had to look his best for his date. He did that with his wives when he went with them on either single dates or in group dates. The only difference he made was to make his hair move down and not be spiky. He dressed in a simple but very classy dress suit, and Selena appeared wearing a white dress with simple but elegant high-heeled shoes and had a purse as well. He managed to get them into one of the more popular restaurants in Gotham, and soon it was a date which was rather nice. Selena actually stated that despite his change in hairstyle, he was not bad looking, and while she asked him if he was sure he could tolerate being seen with her since he was technically a teenager and she was older than him, he laughed a bit. He then replied that considering the modern world's view of things, there was nothing too wrong about this sort of thing, and despite his young look, he was a lot older than she realized. That comment naturally made Selena raise her eyebrow at the comment but decided to let the whole thing. The two of them began to enjoy the day, and despite the fact that there were some comments directed at him by the men in sight and hearing range, and the same to Selena, it was not all bad. The woman managed to tell him about the events that led to her fascination with cats and her love for all kinds, either domesticated or wild. Naruto decided to also trade a bit of his own history. Namely how he actually enjoyed gardening and also working with some animals. He even mentioned that incident with the cat that belonged to the feudal lord's wife and how the thing had given him and his friends a hell of a chase. Selena could not help but picture the sight of that and be slightly amused, but that amusement only grew when Naruto explained just how wily the cat was and how it had tried countless times to turn his face into confetti and also make him go way off the mark. The blonde shinobi also spoke about the tiger he and Hikaru eventually called friend and traveled with, as well as his encounters with other creatures. Naruto then mentioned that despite things he actually had an affinity to toads and foxes, making Selena amused considering the fact he had used a frog puppet to fool her the first time they had met one another. Naruto did not reveal anything else about himself but merely used a cover name, going by the name of Nathan Stein, who had stayed in Japan for a number of years and recently returned to America to get used to seeing the world after being in Japan for so long. To prove it, he even used his real language, which was certainly Japanese to the ear of most people. Something that Selena nodded to. This went on for a while as Selena explained that while she knew that being caught was always a danger as a thief, she lived for the thrill it gave her, and she relished the chance to show her abilities as well as gain gold things to enhance her lifestyle. But she also pointed out that she took care to avoid engaging the police and law enforcement, as well as avoiding harming people unless she had no other choice. And even if she did get forced into a situation where violence was her only chance, she would not make a mistake and kill someone even if it was accidental. That was because she disliked killing unless there was no other alternative, and the fact was that if she killed someone, I would only make things worse for her. And he used the money to obviously fund charitable causes and to help the animals she grew fond of. As dinner came, both of them enjoyed the meal, and before they parted at the end of the night, Naruto told her that he was looking forward to the last day, and she nodded as she did find him charming, but not that charming, to which Naruto took no offense, and soon they were off to their respective hideouts. Ellipsis. As night fell, the chase was on between them, though this time around, Selena took to robbing what was a priceless painting from a collection piece. Naruto had to admit that the choice of T was new until he learned that not only was the painting valuable, but it had the images of Bast and Sekhmet on them, two Egyptian goddesses with cat heads on human bodies. That was enough to make Urama comment that this Selena woman took her love of felines a little too far, to which Naruto had to agree as they were now moving after Selena. And this time, the blonde female thief was going all out on trying to lose him. They were moving from the vault where she stole the painting and into the social district of Gotham. No doubt she was trying to use the place to lure him off her trail. If she could not evade him, fight him, or seduce him, then she was going to distract him in a very different fashion. The sights and sounds were certainly a step up from what he was used to, and he had to be careful since he had to avoid being seen as well. He had to give Selena credit for the deception, and this time around, he was going to have to be careful since it turned out that the woman had decided to cover herself with some form of scent masking on her outfit. She really went all out, and he could guess that the idea of dressing up for him for picture taking was not something she had in mind. But he was not going to give up any time soon as he pursued Selena, relying on his senjutsu to track her down, but it was here that a number of thugs decided to attack one of the nearby theaters, and that was enough to force Naruto to stop and go in to find out what was going on. Apparently a number of the wealthy Gotham class were watching a brand new show, and the thugs intended to rob them. This was enough to make him stop and get into the act, as the people were being forced to give up their money, jewels, credit cards and the like, though why would the people carry those he would never know. The thugs were also interested in holding the performer prisoner, a drop-dead gorgeous raven-haired woman in some seriously attractive female stockings and a rather interesting-looking suit. He saw that the name of the performer was Zatanna, and when he directed his senjutsu senses he was surprised to find that she had a bonfire of chakra in her, as well as a level of energy that he did not recognize well enough. This woman had some serious powers and apparently was not using them yet, and some of the thugs were interested in her, but instead of cowering, the woman fought back like a cornered tigress. This was enough to make Naruto step in as he quickly tossed one of his special kunai to appear into the front of the thugs and Zatanna as he launched himself at them with serious attacks on them all. That surprised the people in the audience, as they had thought Batman and his team were there. Naruto could see that none of the thugs were that skilled, and he wiped the floor with them quickly enough. But one of them managed to get up and grab the magician from behind. He placed a knife on her throat, and that made Naruto all the more annoyed as he knew that this was not good. And the police would not arrive in time, plus Selena was getting away. But he was surprised this time around as Zatanna used her wand and aimed upward to create a powerful blast of powder in the face that was precise. The man began to scream in pain and clutch his nose and eyes as Zatanna then gave the guy a solid kick to the balls, making Naruto raise an eyebrow, enough to distract him. As another thug got up despite the beating to clobber him with a chair. Zatanna waved her wand a bit, making Naruto realize that the energy he sensed was active, and he turned to see the man being tied up by ropes. Where those ropes came from he had no idea, but he was impressed. He turned to Zatanna and asked her if she was fine, and the magic user replied, "I am all right, you're the Hokage, aren't you? Saw me on TV, Miss Zatanna." "Yep, got to say that the change in wardrobe is nice. Anyway, thanks for your help here, didn't think anyone was this crazy to attack. Money can make you do strange things. Anyway, got to go. Hope to meet you again, Miss Zatanna, and nice kick by the way." The raven-haired magician smirked and replied, "Just because I look like this doesn't mean I am helpless. Had previous experience creeps like them. And I hope to meet you again too, you've got some serious powers." And afterwards, Naruto went on with the chase, and despite the distance between him and Selena, he managed to catch her with the Hirishin no Jutsu, his kunai wire, and chakra chain movements plus his speed. The two carried on with their race until they were in sight of the pier that was the safe haven. But Naruto was quickly able to react Selena and suddenly reach the special container she used to hide the painting in. The two managed to duke it out in a fight, but Naruto still nagged to hold on, even with Selena using not just her claws but her whip as well. Naruto quickly took a few smoke bombs, and in a complete reversal of last time, he blinded her and moved in quickly through the smoke and made his move. Just as Selena got away from the smoke and soon they were facing each other, they fought once more, and soon it came to a point that they both fell off the building. And Naruto used his chakra chain to latch on the building and catch Catwoman as they looked at one another. The thief smiled at the rescue as he moved to the other building, and soon they were only a few steps away from the pier. Selena opened the container and rolled it open to find that she got only a blank sheet, and she looked at Naruto to reveal that he had the painting, meaning that he won. Selena sighed at this and knew that the jig was up and looked at Naruto, who smiled warmly underneath his mask. Ellipsis. 2 days later at night. Naruto was very happy with himself as he was now taking a train away from Gotham and heading out of the city. He decided to head back to Los Angeles and stay there for a while until he was done with what he needed to do for his books. In his bag were a number of pictures that had Selena Kyle as the model. The blonde woman was not too keen on it at first, but after some time, she agreed to it, and she wore a number of clothes and dresses that she had on hand that he found very nice. The party dress look, the simple business-like look, and a few others, all none threatening, but very attractive in Naruto's eye. But the highlights of the pictures include dead Selena wearing what was a two-piece swimsuit which was deep black with gold hoops, and also a simple one-piece suit that had oval shapes to reveal her stomach and back and managed to hold her bust. All of which were done alongside Isis in her apartment, and truth be told, Selena was quite surprised that her pet cat, a very discerning judge of character, actually liked Naruto. The blonde was so pleased that unlike the last cat he had to deal with, Isis did not try to turn his face to confetti, and that seemed to confirm to Selena that she could trust Naruto well enough. The whole thing took at least a few hours. All the way to lunch, for which he personally bought with his own money and even bought Isis a few treats of fish, making Selena smirk a bit at his attitude and the fact that he was a very nice guy. Even though it was fairly obvious that he was no saint, since she did catch him looking at her in a less than pure fashion. Still, once it was over, he made sure to keep his word, and for the last 3 days, he left her to her own devices if she ever decided to take back being Catwoman. Which was a good thing in his mind, and he made sure to not bother her again. It was not just Selena though. Apparently Ivy had taken a shot at his offer, and he had indeed helped her on a few things to get the factory closed down and the owners swimming in so many legal problems and being protested that they decided to close down the factory. That also meant that Ivy could now take over and clean up the mess covertly. She was not too sold on the idea just yet, and he expected that to be the case. But that hardly meant that he, and by extension Pamela, did not get to try things out. And sure enough, he enjoyed teasing and flirting with Pamela, who reacted naturally enough, despite the fact that she was still unsure how to react to being with a man who was someone who could not be poisoned by her. He took things slowly and began to really heat things up between them a bit, so she was used to it. And despite her instance that this was not going to change her ways like that, her moaning and groaning was telling him that he was on the right path to something with her. It was not too long though, and despite her denials at times, he could tell that Pamela had enjoyed herself. That was why he made sure to tell her that he had decided to be on call for her if she ever needed someone to talk to as well as keep her company. It made the whole thing a lot more interesting, since one had to know the fact that he was the only man thus far who was not harmed by her in any stretch of the imagination. She replied that she would keep that in mind, but she warned him not to get any ideas. He also ran into Zatanna as she was getting her stuff loaded into her truck for another trip around the country. Though in this case that was last night when he was able to find her. Someone with as much chakra as she did mixed with that other energy was not too hard to miss, and after some time chatting in his disguise, she decided to let him take some pictures of her, which she then signed with her in her costume, which to him was more than enough. The only problem he had before he packed up was meeting that massive figure of a zombie Solomon Grundy. The creature came barreling into a nearby train station that apparently had a shipment of gold being taken in. And on the same night as well as his meeting with Zatanna, so off he went to deal with the new foe that ruined this night of his. However, once he saw the being thrash through the guards and attack them and sensed that he was dead already, it brought back memories of his encounters with ghosts and undead, namely of Hidan and Kakazu, the immortal pair of Akatsuki. He disliked them immensely since they had killed Asuma and left Kurenai a widow and their son fatherless, and while it was something to expect given their lives as Konoha ninja, it hardly meant that they liked it. He personally fought Kakazu while Ikamaru personally defeated Hidan and sealed that bastard away. Solomon Grundy was not in the same league as those two, namely in the brains and justu department, but he was tough. He managed to Santo him from harming any more guards but had to resort to senjutsu to deal with this guy since the magical energy that kept him alive seemed to be affected by it. Naruto was not too sure what was it had brought this dude back to life, but he could tell that it was not the same as Kabuto and Orochimaru's impure world resurrection jutsu, so he was going to have to go all out. He and Grundy tore through the train station, and while the zombie got some hard hits in, the durability he got from his senjutsu form helped him even the odds as he landed blow after blow as well on the former living man. Grundy was less than pleased and tried to squash him more than once and used anything he could to swat him, which was why Naruto used his frog kumite style to knock him around even more until he reverted to something a lot more effective. He summoned the chakra he needed, and despite it not being his chakra affinity, this worked well enough on the undead as far as he had seen. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. The massive fireball slammed into Grundy and sent him screaming in absolute pain as Naruto quickly followed that up with a Rasengan attack that sent the massive zombie flying into a collection of fuel drums, and that was soon followed by a massive fireball of an explosion as the fuel went boom. As soon as that was over, off he went to go back to but not before sending his newest novel to his employer, and this had the theme of the hero dealing with a woman with one serious green thumb, and a lady with a deep connection to cats, though he made sure to make some changes just to be on the safe side. As for Batman and company, they were still surprised at the news of Naruto's activities and wondered just how he had been able to avoid them for so long. But what really got the entire saint of the group were the reports of him fighting Grundy and unleashing a fireball from his mouth, according to witnesses who were not caught in the crossfire of the battle. Bruce knew that it took a lot of force to beat Grundy, and fire alone, while harmful, was not enough to kill the reanimated being. And that was enough to tell him that Grundy was not going to forget the Hokage or what he had done to him. Robin was not too happy, as it turned out the room was not even being rented by anyone, and that meant he was led by the nose, and that grated on the young crime fighter more than he cared to admit. There was also the report that some of the homeless people had said that Ivy was seen in the Hokage's company, and she seemed to be rather calm and seemed to be at ease with the man. That was something he had not expected, and only served to confuse him even more, as he knew how she could easily kill with a kiss, so how the Hokage was alive around her added to the whole mess. As for Clark, the guy's ability to sense him before he could even see him confused the Kryptonians, since as far as he knew, he did not emit any energy waves that could be seen easily. This added more to the whole deal, and he knew that Bruce was not all too keen on things. The Hokage had now disappeared, as the last they had heard of him was that battle with Grundy, and as he gathered the reports for the Daily Planet, there was no doubts in his mind that sooner or later, things were going to come to a head. They were not the only ones to take notice, however. On an island far away from the modern world. Ryu, sure that you have been sensing those changes, Mala? Yes, my queen, every now and then, I sensed a shifting of the world's natural flow of energy, as if it was being taken to a central point, and then as soon as a large amount was taken, it stopped. It was as if someone or something is actually able to tap into the very flow of energy and redirect it. But it did not feel like the energy was being violated. How so? Almost as if the person or persons who did it was not fighting or bringing nature under his or their wills, but allowing it to flow into them and settle. That kind of skill is unlike what I have sensed before. But I have heard stories of people with magic being able to do such feats. I see. Mother, can it really be coming from man's world? I do not know, but as long as it is not being done here, we have little to fear. What happens out there is not our concern, daughter. We have no need to be concerned with the affairs of men. All right, mother, but I cannot help but be curious. You were always the curious one, my little sun and stars, but place that aside for now. Your sister is waiting for you in the training hall. Yes, mother. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you all are enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to support author of this fanfic. So let's end this video here. Until then, see you in next video.